So God face-planted and messed up. Then I showed up in front of him, and he confessed that he'd accidentally killed me. As his apology, he offered me reincarnation in a whole new world. God leaned in and asked if it all sounded ridiculous to me, and I snapped back, not at all, because I'd carry that life with pride, no regrets, and I'm ready to live my best second one. Then God leaned in and told me he was relieved. I'd chosen right, because there was no way he could ever send me back to that same world where I died. And as my reward, he promised me something the moment I was reborn. God told me I'd be handed 3 abilities, and I'd have to use them smart or pay the price. I had zero clue what they were, so I just nodded and thanked him, praying I'd understand in time. And at the very end, he told me, clear as day, that he hoped my new life would be drenched in happiness. And that's how he finally came back, reborn as the strongest peasant. He cracked his eyes open for the first time. Then the girl's voice hit him, calling him her brother. But everything was a blur at first, because after the resurrection, his vision had to learn how to focus. Chappelle, the little girl standing in front of the hero, shot her brother a worried look and asked if he was sick, like, had he slept too long? The boy slowly swung himself out of bed, insisted he was fine, and admitted he'd slept so long because he'd had an awesome dream. Chappelle let out a relieved smile and said she was glad everything was okay. The boy started slipping on those long boots, and in his mind, he replayed just how long it had been. As God kept his promise, he got a second life and was reborn into a brand new world. In the world he once lived in, this man was just an everyday office clerk, his life so dull it could have put you to sleep. And then, he died at 40. Then boom, he reincarnated as a young peasant, Vibal, but everyone ditched the long name and called him Belle, and the moment he looked over, his little sister still flashed that same sweet smile. All right, let me introduce her. The hard-working sister of Belle Chappelle, just 2 years younger than her brother, and she's almost always this cheerful. In this world, there wasn't even gas, electricity, or running water. Everything looked like some quiet backwoods corner of the map, so we'd wake up every day and throw ourselves into the same tasks, no questions asked. Belle was right on the edge of heading outside, waving to his little sister, and sure, life here doesn't look sweet, but now Belle's about to flip the script and show them everything. As he stepped outside, a fresh breeze hit the young man like a gift from the sky. Belle even said today's weather was perfect, like it never rained yesterday, and honestly, he loved living here. After a quick glance around, the boy realized he had to get to work before breakfast, and when he looked at his father's grave, Belle told him straight up he was headed to work. Right then, another voice cut in. Someone wished the boy good morning. Belle whipped around with a grin and found his mother coming over, basket in hand, and she told him their field was so rich it had gone wild, choked up with weeds. Belle burst into laughter, then shrugged it off, saying the guy could just haul in some goats there, because they'd go wild for that snack. Staring at the animals, Belle snapped back to the thought. If the weather was this perfect, he had to take the wounded goat out, because that poor thing had never even left the barn. The boy stepped into the barn, rushed up to the goat, and inspected its hoof like it mattered, then gently stroked its fur, telling it everything would be fine soon. Belle watched, thinking, moments like this prove nobody can replace his gifts. God warned that eye lasers would be too wild for this world, so he handed him 3 simple, convenient abilities, starting with superhuman strength. Belle admits it sounds simple, but once it's real, he can heave weights that hit 5 tons, and to top it off, that beast is hard to break. After he scooped up the wounded goat, Belle hauled it into the field and coaxed it to inch forward and heal, while someone yelled that the kid's strength was straight up unbelievable. He spun around and caught a girl sprinting straight at him, waving with a gentle smile. Emerald, Belle blurted out when she'd come back, and Emerald told her she'd returned the night before. Emerald, this green-eyed spark, is an adventurer in training, and she admits she had a blast, but she still doesn't think it's a good idea to dive into that life. She beamed after that, tugged at her hair until it sat right, and told Belle the whole trip had been amazing. Then she thanked the guy too, for the tools he'd handed her. Belle shot back that he'd always be happy to help, and when Emerald stepped in close, she told him straight up that if he still hadn't caught on, then her journey wasn't for nothing, and her eyes dropped downward. The girl shot Belle a look full of disgust and demanded to know why he treated her like she was some kid when he was the younger one. Belle paused for a beat, then burst into laughter. Beaming, the boy admitted it was his own fault, since he never imagined that the crybaby Emerald would grow into such a diligent lady. Then the girl's anger flared as she snapped at Belle to stop bringing it up. Even though he was 15 in this world, the memories from before clung to him, and now his peers looked to him like younger sisters. If you look at it through the lens of that Belle at 40 timeline, then yeah, people might have called them her daughters, because in his past life, he'd never been married, and he had no clue how any of this worked. After that, he decided it was time to head home, because once the grind was done, he could finally start breakfast, and that hunger was already roaring in his stomach. As soon as her brother stepped in, Chappelle came running to greet him, and Belle barely glanced up from the table just to say everything looked insanely delicious. Mom even chimed in that Chappelle had really tried hard for him. As Mom closed the distance, she questioned Tuta, basically hinting that Belle might have spotted him while he was outside. Then the guy fired back, asking whether he'd actually made it back home yet. Then a little boy popped out from behind the door, clutching an arrow strap in his hand, and his mother instantly snapped her focus to him, telling him to hurry, wash up, and take a seat at the table. Tauta decided to flex on the spot, lifting the tiny hair by its ears, and Belle grinned like, nice, then told him they'd cook it later. Mom ran her hand over the boy's head and swore he'd grow up to be a hunter, because he was already crazy passionate about the craft. Tuta, yeah, Belle's younger brother, was also the one who kept the house fed, bringing in the meat. Chappelle stirred her breakfast in the saucepan and snapped, "Guess what? Our warehouse is overflowing with meat now." Then Belle chimed in, "We could even send some to Grandma from the drugstore." Tauta sprinted up to his older brother and blurted, "Belle promised she'll teach us magic today." He just wanted to make sure it stuck in his brother's head, but the boys stared back like they hadn't heard a word. Toot totally owned up that he'd blanked on it, and the second he did, Chappelle swooped in, hands on her hips, yelling that Belle never remembers a thing. The guy just grinned, apologized, and suggested they grab food first. Belle couldn't believe how insanely popular magic was in this world, and the last two abilities he got from God were straight up tied to it. But once Belle showed up in a world where kids and adults alike could cast spells, his power became an absolute lifesaver, an endless, unlimited kind of magic. After using it, the guy flicked his hands away, sending them down to the ground, then grinned like, "Yep, that's exactly what I wanted to do right now." And Tata and Chappelle were standing so close, it felt like one wrong breath could start something. The kids saw how the boy expertly ran his magic and erupted in cheers, yelling that his brother's powers were, as usual, absolutely unreal. Then Belle showed them how to forge a stone fence. Tuta stared ahead for ages, then grinned at his older brother, met his eyes, and promised, "When I grow up, I want to be just like Belle." Belle's cheeks warmed as he gave a shy little smile, soaking in the fact that those had to be the best words any older brother could ever hear. And yeah, he couldn't stop thinking that Tu was a total cutie. The kids pounced on Belle, begging her to teach them how to use the magic. But the boy shrugged and told them, "Go on, try it yourselves. You'll learn the hard way, through your mistakes." After that, Chappelle snapped at him to cough up at least some clue, and Belle paused, thinking hard before saying he reckoned imagination control could be the real power move in this whole mess. The kids looked at their brother like, "Wait, what are you even talking about?" and hung back for the next order, until it hit them that this was all Belle was trying to say. And then they started bombarding him with, "Okay, how do we feel it, and how do we control it?" Belle smacked his hand over his face. Stuck, because how do you even explain it in simpler words? And just like that, the kids kept pressing him, asking over and over what that control was. Totua said his brother was talking way too overcomplicated, and Belle realized they didn't even understand the word control themselves. So the kids started figuring out how to explain magic to children in a whole new, simpler way. And now Belle snapped, raised his index finger, and told Tuta and Chappelle to picture anything they could in their heads. The boys grinned and told the kids, "Just try first," and that brave cheer lit everyone up. Then Tuda and Chappelle rolled into stretch positions, crossed their arms, and started flashing all kinds of different gestures. Chappelle started grabbing her older brother's attention, tugging at him to look, and when she blurted that she could wield fire and ice in her hands, Belle's eyes lit up, because it was obvious she had real magic. Tuda's results crushed him, way worse than hers, so when he stared at his own pathetic lightning and wind, his eyes filled with sorrow, especially after how effortlessly his sister had handled it. Belle kept rubbing his chin, thinking, "Toad's only 10 too, and he's already here." And then he bragged to himself that he was a real genius, because the mana coming off him felt absolutely massive. Belle knew he'd picked up magic fast, but what they had learned blew him away, and once it was over, he figured he couldn't teach them a single thing more. The kids stood there in perfect silence, waiting for Belle's next move, and as he looked them over and saw those adorable faces, he told them he'd give them his congratulations, because they'd passed the test. Then the boy shot his index finger back into the air and said the next move was imagination control, using the same Magic Bell basics, but twisted with a little imagination, and everything changes. Now, Bell wanted to prove a point. The guy flicked his finger through the air, selling fire magic. Then, in his mind, he pictured light, and a blazing beam snapped out behind that finger. Then he glanced at Chappelle and told her the girl would get her own homework. She'd have to forge a square using light magic, and the girl shot her hand up, swearing it would all be done. Then Bell snapped his eyes to his older brother, far less impressed than Chappelle. Yet Bell still insisted, that boy has to master the whirlwind. To lift Tauta's spirits, Bell took a breath, showed him his own spell, and said, "If he can do it, so can I." Then he blasted out a full-on whirlwind. Tuto stared with wide eyes, then blurted that he'd go all in, and Bell grinned, warning him not to overdo it or burn himself out. Then the older brother spun back, waved them off, and said they were finished for the day, since Bell still had work to do. Chappelle, fired up by what she'd just witnessed, urged Tutor to train together. When you train like this and force your mind to mirror what's in your head, you don't just study, you learn the local magic itself, piece by piece. And if you can't afford a grimoire, you'll have to carve out your own way through magic. Bell figured he still had plenty of free time, so the guy could mess around with magic, just like in his past life, until it hit her. He'd always wanted to summon a whirlwind from his favorite anime. And yeah, there were spells that cost 0 mana at all. For Bell, this was God's third gift, a magic barrier that lived in his bones. He pictured it in his head, and the next second a glowing cube snapped into place on his hand. That barrier God handed him could morph into anything at all. So yeah, no question, it was the strongest weapon this guy ever had. But all that power came with teeth. Bell knew using it could spell disaster, so he kept quiet about it, and only his family ever got to know. Right then, Bell found himself in the pantry when he suddenly heard footsteps heading his way. Chappelle came in, shouting that lunch was ready and that everyone was waiting on Bell so they could all pile into the table together. Bell shot his sister a grateful look, grabbed firewood plus a barrel, and started climbing up, while the boy begged her to whip up a deer stew for Grandma so it had to be extra soft. After dinner, the boy explained that 2 portions were needed since he planned to hand the rest to his uncle, the merchant. And then Bell thanked everyone for the meal before promising he'd be back before sunset. Right before heading out, Bell spun back to the kids and warned them. If a monster showed up near the village, they had to blast it away with magic. The kid stacked every last item onto his cart, then rattled it straight into the heart of the village, Colonia, and that place was way across from the mountain where Bella's family lived. That's why they rolled in by cart to get there. So the boys scanned the place, broke into a grin, and immediately thought, "Man, I really love riding this thing in weather like this." As he rode past the fields, Bell leaned over and waved at a girl named Sally Berry, then teased her by saying she looked beautiful, only for Sally to snap back that he had some serious impudence. Bell's grin stretched even wider as he shrugged, basically saying, "Yeah, I was born like this. Don't take my word too seriously." Then he leaned in and told them that Sally Berry was the most refined girl in the village, the local princess. Sally Berry jumped onto the guy's cart and claimed she'd ride with him if he was headed for the colony. And since she'd already plopped down, Belle snapped back, saying she hadn't even waited for his answer about where he was going. The girl whipped around, staring at him like he'd lost his mind, telling Belle to stop wasting his breath. Then she said the guy looked lonely, so she'd stick with him. Belle kept walking, telling herself the girl wasn't so bad, yet something about her still rubbed him the wrong way, until the guy suddenly spun around and blurted that he remembered something. The guy grinned and told them Emerald was back in the village, and Belle chimed in that he'd seen her this morning too, said she hadn't changed one bit. The girl pondered for a second and only whispered, But the guy caught it and pressed, asking why she chopped her friend's name like that. And before she could answer, her thoughts got hijacked by the horror of split ends in her hair. Belle spun around, stared at the road with a gloomy frown, and couldn't shake the feeling that the girl's reaction was weirdly off. Then he muttered that he still didn't get girls. Every single one of Belle's childhood friends was drop-dead gorgeous. Tawala the seamstress, Emerald the adventurer, and even Princess Sallyberry herself, so everyone just called them the three beauties of the mountain. Then the guy pressed the girl for answers. Why Colonia, of all places? Sally Berry shot back that she had to get to work because she was the best cosmetologist in the whole village. Later, she admitted that being beautiful was brutally hard, and Belle stared at her with pure awe while he realized she hadn't changed a bit, not even after all this time. Sally Berry snapped her gaze onto the boy with a sour look, muttering that he'd probably come up with something stupid. Then they laughed and fired back that, nope, it wasn't like that at all. After a quick pause, Belle leaned in and started firing off questions, asking how the girl was doing in her classes and making it crystal clear, yeah, the job mattered, but her studies mattered even more. He kept his grip on the reins, leaned over, and asked the girl how she was doing with the calligraphy book. She just closed her eyes and said, "It's so easy." The moment Belle locked eyes with him, it was obvious he didn't buy a word she said. He basically shut her down, saying there was no point lying since he wasn't the one crying about wanting to learn how to read and write. The girl started trembling with pure excitement, and Belle kept going, telling her to study every single day, even if it's only a little. Then he tried to explain what would happen if she did, but right in the middle, he got cut off. Sally Berry cut him off and told him in no uncertain terms that he had no business scolding the girl. And then she hit him with her dream. She wanted to be as smart as Belle himself, and she'd prove it the moment she got home. After that, the girl shrieked, "Belle, don't laugh!" And the guy just stared, totally lost, until she finally snapped that he kept seeing her like a little kid who refused to study. Then she snapped that he was conceited, swearing she'd never let anyone laugh at her, and when she grabbed his sleeve, Belle shot back fast that she was behaving dangerously because she might fall at any moment. Belle stared down, and the thought hit him hard. If he had to deal with her all day, his otherworld life was about to get brutal. Because she kept screaming that he wasn't listening to a word she said. Soon they rolled up to the settlement of Kalaya and finally grabbed a quick break, right as the girl stood there with her arms crossed and blurted that she'd totally forgotten to ask why the guy was even heading to the place. Then the guy stared at the girl and told her he had way too much on his plate. He still had to haul firewood to the store and head to the Adventurers Guild to watch the kids train, and that wasn't even the full story. Then Belle would dash to the pharmacy to grab food for his grandma, swing by the fishing harbor, and when the girl let out a sigh calling it boring, Belle rubbed the horse's neck and told her, "It's just my usual day." Then the girl pitched her own plan and told Belle, "Come shopping with me." Prane snapped in pure outrage, acting like that idea was impossible, that it even crossed her mind. She leaned in, teased that he was probably sick of doing the same routine every single day, and that's why she told him to take a real break. Then Belle wouldn't let up. She snapped that the girl had a job too and needed to get ready, and Sally Berry's temper flared, until the young man shot back that she was unbearably narcissistic. Right after that, the door Belle had knocked on earlier cracked open, and the moment Grandma spotted the young man, her face lit up. She practically begged him to help her with a few chores right away. Belle, still planted on the doorway, declared he was free and itching to get to the bottom of this. Then the moment Sally Berry heard him, her indignation flared up instantly. That girl stiffened and shot out a sour, guarded glare, but Bell shoved it all aside. The guy apologized and admitted it looked like he had some business to handle here. Sally Berry snapped that she'd asked the boy for a favor first, and Bell only fired back that he shouldn't skip work, making it sound like he was slipping out of her grip way too easily. That girl pouted, spat out a couple harmless jabs at the guy, and right then the grandmother, lurking in the doorway, snapped that Belle was clearly struggling to win over the crowd. Belle snapped that she must never bring it up again, then dove straight into figuring out what help was needed because Grandma was already insisting she wanted to buy meat. Bella rolled up with a full cart of supplies, and the boy went along. Then he stopped cold, because for a grandmother, that was way too unusual. And he pressed her, sure something darker must have happened. The woman said that a wrecked ship had been sitting in the harbor for 3 days, and its crew was gorging on supplies, so that's why the stock on the counter was getting wiped out so fast. He understood her at once and shrugged that buying all that in just 3 days wasn't a big deal. Then the grandmother blinked in shock and demanded Belle explain what he meant. Then the young man shrugged and admitted he didn't know the ship's size, but from its history, it had to have carried about 20 or 30 crew. So he couldn't stop wondering how they managed to feed all those people every single day. Belle also swore this village could live off the land, meaning if they lingered too long, the food would dry up. The woman pressed a hand to her face, instantly catching the drift of what the guy was warning them about. Belle kept talking. Just recently they'd gotten a brand new lord, and he hiked the taxes so hard that some folks could barely scrape by, handing over every last bit to the state treasury. He wrestled with it, then warned them. If they couldn't crack this with the ship and their food, everything would spiral into a nasty disaster. The woman spun around and warned that this problem was exploding bigger every second. Then she bolted for the door, while Belle snapped, "Wait!" He peered in, baffled by the chaos, and then he realized he couldn't spot the woman anymore, so he bolted for the harbor, because Belle was freaked out and his grandmother's anger was already burning hot. The boy reached a quiet, peaceful shoreline, his cartwheels rattling like thunder, and Belle himself started putting the clues together, thinking this had to be about a massive ship. Until one tiny detail threw everything off. Belle didn't know it would be this massive. When the guy told him the ship was the size of a small island, Belle almost choked. And then he saw it had a hole in the hole, sealed up with nothing but wooden planks. Belle clutched the reins and kept scanning the ship. Then he spotted the crowd loitering nearby, and he couldn't tell if they were guards or just killing time. Once he finally got the horse off and lashed it to a tiny post, he spotted a mountain of cargo, and he couldn't stop staring, thinking that this magical ship was pure wonder and probably owned by some filthy rich guy. Every box lined up along the shore bore the same legendary logo. One Belle recognized instantly, because it belonged to the company Bazuador. It was the most legendary trading company in the whole country, run by Barvan Baziudor, and the boy had also heard their fortune was untouchable. The boy scratched his head, thinking the king was probably hearing every word, and then it hit him. He'd just run into heavyweights who might not even spare him a second glance. The boy prayed that everything would work out for once, and just then, a familiar voice snapped his name, only to reveal an older man standing there, urging him to come with him. The man told us an old lady from the main store had sprinted up to him and shouted that if they wanted a future for their village, they'd have to handle this company. Belle shut his eyes and threw his head back, thinking that the granny was way too wild for her age, and the boy was already worn out by her non-stop energy. As they strolled the harbor, a lone man stormed up to them and shouted at the elder, saying he'd been waiting for him. Then Belle just stared in disbelief, because this place only had that ship for 3 days. So how did everyone already know the elder? He shot out his hand and demanded permission to introduce himself, then grinned and said, "I'm Laguerre, a proud member of the Bachivador Trading Company." The man snapped his attention to the boy and said he'd already heard rumors about him calling Belle a local kid prodigy, stories people had been throwing his way for ages. The elder snapped back that at 4 years old, Belle was the only one who could read and write. By 10, she could use magic, and she even knew pharmacology, so that's why he chose her as the one to go negotiate. Bell swallowed his frustration and thought the village just tossed everything on his shoulders. Then the boy forced a desperate smile and blurted that they were finally ready to hear this man out. Legier didn't waste a word. He just said he was ready to cut right to the point. The man grinned, dipped his head, and then straight up said they needed the boy's horse. Tension snaps between them at once. Bell bristles at the offer, while the trading company's smiling rep thrusts out his hand and basically says, "We'll even pay you." Staring at Legier, Bell figured this guy thought money could buy the whole village. And Bell also knew he didn't realize the truth. There was only one way to get home. Legier kept grinning like nothing mattered, but Bell only let out a heavy sigh. He knew all too well this man was judging everyone by status, and it showed. Then Bell shot his hand forward, jabbed a finger at the man, and told him straight up, the horse would be sold for 100 gold. If he couldn't cough up that money, the deal was dead. The man's shoulders tightened fast. Then he leaned in and told you that the store sells a horse and cart for 50 gold, something he was sure you didn't know. Bell insisted that the merchant decides the price and the rules, but the seller grinned and claimed he'd give him a fair deal, and the other guy immediately refused to accept it. He also told them that if he sold the horse, he'd need a few days to haul his stuff back home, because living on top of that mountain makes everything a nightmare, and if he left for that long, he wouldn't be able to deliver any firewood. Look, losing the horse wasn't the only problem. Bell already set a price that covered every disaster that could hit him, so his answer was the truth, and he wasn't about to budge. The man kept squirming in place as Bell just stood there, grinning. Then a voice barked, ordering Legier to stop, and the man jerked hard like he'd been hit. A big sailor in furs clambered up onto the deck, and the boss snapped that if his subordinate reacted like that during negotiations, he clearly wasn't skilled enough for the job. The blond man with a mustache and a bit of stubble ran the company, and the second he spoke, he rushed to apologize to the boy, just in case the guy underneath slipped up and insulted him during their talk. The boy grinned and said, "Nope, nothing offended me," then insisted the man just call him Bell. After that, he leaned in and offered, "If you still need that horse, I'm ready to keep going." The man strode up, bowed to the boy, and blurted out that he needed his help to save the team. Then Legier snapped at his boss, and that worry about his boss's mental state started to crawl in. The man told him the boy could still laugh, but if anyone could save them right now, he didn't care who it was, even if it was the god of death. The boy carried a problem that could wipe out the entire company. The man leaned in and said he wanted the boy's child prodigy wisdom, promising he'd do everything he could to repay him later. Bell could tell that the man was ready to go that far, even with the boy right where he was, and Bell thought, that's exactly how a real boss moves. Bell agreed he could help, and the boss warned, "Then you'll owe me one," while admitting he had a ton of questions, until the sky dimmed and he cut the talk short by inviting Bell to his place. Bell flashed a grin at the man and invited him to crash at their place for the night, and the boss smiled back, saying he'd never turn down a chance like that. As he stepped into Bell's house, the man bragged that they had a massive place, bath included, plus a separate guest house, and he even claimed that the wealthy back in the capital had fewer comforts than his own family. The boss was beyond thrilled by the visit, and then he clocked Giza's dish, something he'd never tasted before. He devoured it, loved it, and even Bell couldn't charm him into thinking he could ask for more. Bell said that a merchant of that caliber would probably chow down on something way better than plain home cooking, and the guy leaned in to ask what Bell thought. He told me they live out at sea most days, and even with the best chef around, there's only so much flavor you can squeeze out of dried meat and canned food. Bell said that's why everyone stormed the store and snatched up every last bit of food, and the boss nodded, admitting they'd gone way too long without real, proper meals. Belvery leaned in and snapped that the man and his crew must stop those kinds of buys from now on, because every time they did, they rattled the locals and threw their lives out of balance. After that, the guy spilled the details about the ship, and the boy started digging into where the hole really was. Right there, below the waterline or not, and that sharp, professional question left the boss genuinely stunned. Bell couldn't believe it. They even dragged themselves to the village harbor with that broken ship, and that was shocking considering how good the vessel was. The boss clasped his hands and stared at the boy. then basically admitted the truth. That kid was a child prodigy, and he was freakishly good at it. Bell grinned wide and claimed he'd read tons, but really, he was lost in memories of his old life and the documentaries that had actually helped him survive. The boy snapped his gaze to the trading company's boss and demanded, "You really want us to haul everything on my horse?" The boss grimly admitted it was a full-on emergency, no other option left, no matter what. Bell said he'd need a full day to haul the cargo, one more day to get the ship ready, and once all that was done, he'd start repairs. Then he'd spend a couple more days fixing everything. Once Bell had everything in hand, he told them, "Give me 5 days. I'll fix the mess my boss's team can't." The guy stared in disbelief and asked, "You're really going to plug that hole in just 5 days?" The man snapped that it was impossible, and the boy probably had no clue. So Bell clasped his hands and declared he'd seal that hole with a barrier. They'll stack barriers in a tight circle, then shut the entire opening by layering those walls on top of each other, layer after layer, until it's nearly airtight. The kid even bragged that wood would make the stuff stronger and way lighter, but the boss just froze, then admitted he didn't get a word of it and only demanded, "So how much will it cost me?" The young man flashed a grin and told the boss not to fret. Then Bell leaned in and said there was one job only he could handle, before talking about the Lord who just shifted things. The boss smirked and said, "I've seen you before, after all." Then Bell snapped back, "Not long ago, you hiked the taxes in our village, and ever since, the villagers have been drowning in trouble." Then the guy flashed a totally evil grin and told him that, with the connections the gentleman had, he could fix everything. What he wanted was the man's help in return. The boss leaned in and asked if Bell would mind while the man took care of him. And Bell just laughed it off, smiling again, until the man leaned close and admitted he was a truly awful person. Days slid by, just like Bell promised, until the site of the Sunder was finally ready, sealed tight with magical barriers, and the man stared up, shocked that Bell had actually managed to pull it off. Bell stood beside him, grinned, and said he always kept his word, so when the boss was happy, he told him, "Then you'd better do the same." After that, they clasped hands hard, and Bell told the boss that if he ever ended up nearby, he'd come straight over to see him, for sure, while the boss grinned and promised he'd be right there, waiting for his new friend. The ship swallowed every last box that had been sitting on the pier, then eased away inch by inch until the sea swallowed it into the distance, when someone suddenly shouted out to Bell. The girl grinned and told Bell she'd totally forgotten her, and Bell shrugged back that it was completely normal to run into a lady who worked for the Adventurers Guild in this place. The woman claimed she was just out shopping. Then Bell pressed her about the guild, and Neurophilia shot back that the requests for goblins were stacking up more and more. She started to say there hadn't been many casualties yet, but the girl had heard they'd hit a caravan near Mount Asaraki, so now the whole guild was on edge, watching every move. Bell grinned and told the guild he'd gladly wipe out a few monsters, because letting their numbers grow would be a disaster. The girl shot back a smile, like she already knew exactly how strong he was. Problems kept crashing down on him back to back, and Bell swore this week had been brutal, until he stepped onto the porch and remembered Tudo was hunting near the mountain, so he had to warn him fast. The instant Bell remembered his little brother, he was suddenly right there, bolting forward with his quiver slung behind his back, only saying, "If Tauta's hunting, then the goblins will show up there." Tuta trembled like crazy and immediately cowered behind his brother, and Bell was completely lost. Until he turned and spotted the group of people who hurried over, apologized, and admitted they'd been following the kid. Everyone had their hoods up, and it clicked. These people weren't just wandering, they were hunting that kid to get Bell. The girl thrust her hand forward and demanded, "Are you V. Bell Fasfini?" Bell slapped it into place. "It was me!" and started digging until he figured out who those hooded creeps were, the ones that scared his brother. And when the girl finally yanked off her hood, she apologized again for being rude. They started introducing themselves, unveiling their faces one by one. Vanessa was on the right, towering above the rest. Salila stood in the middle, and Alathera took the third spot. After that, the girl who had bowed so solemnly blurted out her name, Tokola, captain of the Sea Raiders called Light in the Darkness. And then she asked Belle if the girls could crash there for the night. Belden finally got why they decided to crash at his place. Yeah, the kid kept insisting there'd be a hotel at the bottom of the mountain, but Takola shut that down and made it clear they weren't chasing a simple place to sleep. The girls clocked that he had this crazy, rumor-backed personality, and they also heard he had a huge bathtub at home, so now they were itching to scrub off every last speck of dirt from their trip. The girls insisted they'd cover every last bill, and Belle froze for a second, then grinned and said, "Perfect. Then you can pay with stories instead. Tell me about your travels." Takola slapped her hand to her chest and declared, "We agreed on this!" The other travelers broke into smiles, and Takola promised she'd spill every detail until the boy was finally satisfied. The girls finally got settled at Belle's, munching down on a feast. Then they got marched off to the bath, and while they relaxed, the guy stepped into the backyard and sharpened up his weapon for the campaign. Chappelle burst around the corner, locked eyes with her brother, and demanded where he was headed. Belle shot back that he was going after the goblins, and he added he'd heard too many of them had been popping up lately. Chappelle's face lit up the second she heard it. "That's so cool," the girl blurted, then grabbed her brother's sleeve and begged him to bring her along because she couldn't wait to test out brand new magic. Belle just snapped that she still had to cook dinner, but the girl started tugging at his clothes, shouting that it wasn't fair. Then Belle's temper flared, saying there were already too many of them, so he'd take her next time. Belle slipped into the forest, scanning every shadow. Everyone said goblins were weak, but he'd heard the wild tale of 3,000 goblins raising a whole city. So far, though, the woods were eerily empty. After digging a little deeper, the guy's nose twitched. He caught a familiar scent, and then he snapped. Some idiot set a fire right in the middle of the forest. Baal knew full well that those moves could torch the nearby trees in seconds, and then a massive fire would roar through the whole forest. Suddenly, boom! An explosion tore through the air, and Belle snapped his arms up just in time to shield himself. But the guy's eyes went wide when he saw a child's silhouette dropping out of the smoke, screaming at the top of his lungs. It was Tauta, sprawled on the soft grass, soot all over him. Then he jerked upright, shaking grime off like it was nothing, and Belle rushed to his side, worried sick and asking if he was okay. Tuta barely got the words out that he'd been attacked by someone he never even saw. Then a shadow slipped out from behind the trees and claimed he'd spotted another target. And right after that, Tuta snapped that none of it mattered because they'd all be dead soon anyway. It was some kind of monster that threw up his hands, then declared that every single person would be wiped out by the flawless Ricks. The Ricks stood there in perfect uniforms, and their race wasn't human at all. Ricks kept talking, firing off questions to the plebeians about how they liked his charm, and apparently it left them totally dumbfounded. Belle decided he'd better not drop his guard for even a second. Belle figured it was just some scrawny goblin, until he leaned over to Tauta and grilled him about whether he'd beaten him. The goblin looked weak, sure, but his fire magic was deadly. Rick rose to his feet and listened as the brothers murmured together. Tauta even claimed he handed the goblin the opening to cast its magic, but kept pushing anyway. So yeah, he came off as pretty stupid. With that, Rick launched at the boys, roaring at them not to test his patience by dragging his name into it, because the goblin had already decided to make them regret it. Belle stayed calm, spat out a burst of magic, and slammed an earthen barrier up in front of him, while Rix leapt back, cackling, and taunted him like, "That's all you've got, kid?" The second Rick pushed in, Belle snapped up a barrier, straight into his face. Then the goblin yelped that it hurt like crazy. The goblin crashed to the ground, but the brothers stayed planted, solid as stone. Belle swore the thing was so dumb it just charged the barrier at full speed, like it wanted to slam right into it. He figured it didn't matter how dumb that goblin was. If a whole nest was packed with monsters like him, the locals were about to get crushed. He figured he needed to call in the pros. Then Belle slipped back home and found the guild girls cooking, so he wasted no time, jumped in, and told them he was assigning them a job. Belle grinned, then bowed and apologized for the trouble. The boy perked up, asking if he could go hunt goblins for him. The girls lit up and said yes, because they still owed him for his hospitality. Just then, another girl from the squad slipped in, hood still up. After Belle said they could grab anything they needed, Altera straight up demanded a wet stone, some water, and a dry ration. Then she said 2 copies of the map of the area would be perfect. She asked if he could pull all of that off, and Belle shot back a confident yes. The girl spun around and headed out, and the squad leader barked that she shouldn't wander off. So Altera shot back with a dry little, "Sure," and basically backed him up. Belle realized he'd never seen that girl before, and the way she carried herself screamed professional. Then he shot the group leader a question: what he did wrong, and why she wouldn't even look his way. Takola steps in and snaps him back to calm, telling him straight up that this is just how Altera works, while the girl, having been through hell, draws firm lines for herself right away about how she'll talk to anyone. Takola flashed a smile and told Belle, "Altera's not a bad girl at all. She just needs time to open up once she feels trust." And Belle watched her walk away. The guy slipped into the forest after the girl, and once she spotted him, Altera snapped that the boy should have been asleep hours ago, because he wasn't just wandering, he was chasing her. Belle grinned and told the girl, "Don't get sarcastic, miss," then added that he had business to take care of here. The boy crouched low and started scooping herbs off the ground, swearing that the best medicinal plants are gathered under the full moon, because that's when they heal the winds faster, and when trouble hits, they'll come in clutch. Belle raised one of the stalks toward Tauta with a warm grin, promising he'd hand it over so Tauta could heal the burns he'd taken when he fought that goblin. The girl slid down beside him, dropping to a kneel, then calmly told him the herbs he was picking wouldn't heal a single burn. Belle just blinked, thrown off by what she'd said. The girl plucked the herbs herself and shoved them into the boy's hands, then told him that Belle should boil the herbs in her right hand for toot and pour in the juice from another plant. Belle said the girl clearly knew her herbs, since even the guy had never heard of a recipe like that. And the girl smiled and said, "Of course, this one's been handed down in my family for generations." Then she gave a shy little smile and promised it would work, while the girl gripping a flower whispered that she could only pray his condition would finally get better. Belle noticed she barely ever showed her face, and it was a pain to even get a word out of her, so she told him that straight up. Then Belle gushed that she was fascinating and asked if he could call her by her first name. Then the girl yanked her hood into place and snapped that she wouldn't let the boy use her name. She hated it. So Belle whipped around and insisted, "To me, it's beautiful." Later, the girl pressed Belle, "Do you know what Altera means in Elvish?" Belle just stayed quiet, and then Altera revealed it. "It means a raven, lost in the night's darkness." At last, the girl ripped off her hood, and Belle caught a glimpse of sharp elven ears and dark, stormy hair. Altera even warned that black hair spelled a bad omen for her people. Then she blurted out that she's a half-breed on top of everything else, and when Altera tried to draw the line, she shut it down. No matter what, talking to her would only spell trouble. And finally, Altera cracked and opened up to him the way Belle wanted, but for ages she just stared, unable to find the words, while he kept watching the girl. Altera shot him a look in return, bracing for anything but the reaction she feared. After a couple tense minutes of silence, Belle finally spoke, and it totally shocked the girl. The young man had praised Alter's amazing hair. The girl snapped back, furious that he never seemed to even listen to her. The boy said he'd been listening, and then Belle leaned in and basically summed her up as a dark-haired girl with a little elven blood, while insisting he didn't know anything about her past. It couldn't be allowed to mess with her future. Belle told him, "Look, she's not alone. Those are her comrades, and they're traveling with her." Then the guy pushed back hard. "Forget that curse and stride forward like you own the world, proud no matter what." The boy kept staring at the dark-haired elf, never blinking, and finally blurted out that she was beautiful. Then the words hit, and embarrassment flooded her face. She mulled it over and said the guy was talking to his elders in a way that felt strangely bold. Then Belle just shrugged and said he was only speaking his mind about Altera's lovely hair. The next morning, Altera burst in from the neighbor's house, where their whole crew was stuffing themselves for breakfast. Then the guy spotted her, shot up a wave, and greeted her like it was the best part of the day. The other girls in the C-Rink group caught it and burst into laughter, claiming Belle was clearly the best. Then the second girl scoffed that she liked the younger guys more too. But Altera snapped, yelling that it didn't matter what they thought. Not long after, the girl ran into Tuda in one of the passageways and blurted out how he was feeling. Tuda grinned, said the pain was gone, and then he thanked Miss. Altera broke into a huge smile and told her she'd always be ready to help. And the moment those words hit, the girl swore her heart started shining bright. Once again meeting Belle, the girl stepped in closer, flashed a warm smile, and thanked Belle from the bottom of her heart for her honesty. An adventurer burst into Belle's tiny workshop, stunned that the guy could actually forge metal. Belle shrugged and said he only knew a bit, started as a hobby, but the truth was, he was doing it impressively well. The girl bragged that his blade was way better than anything store-bought, and she swore she'd fight for a weapon like that. Belle couldn't help but smile, and then she asked, "So what about one-handed swords?" Belle said he remembered making them. He just had to recall where he shoved them last. The boy swung the door open, and boom, they were staring at a huge storage room packed with his creations. Tokola scanned the place, grilling Belle like, "Did you really do all of this alone?" And Belle snapped back, "Yeah, I helped my neighbors a ton, but I still saved plenty for myself." Peeking inside, the rest of the group couldn't believe it. The guy had silver-plated armor and iron shields, and Altera snapped that this house wasn't just a home. It was basically a full-on armory. Belle yanked open one of the corner chests and started digging through it. Then, after a couple minutes, the guy blurted out what he'd found and shoved the blade in its dark sheath to Tokola. He said the blade was razor-thin, but he swore it would still end fights, and then he offered, "Want to test it?" She nodded, drew the sword too, and agreed to see if it really had that killing power. Tokola slammed her blade down, and the sword Belle was holding snapped clean in two in an instant. Belle still stood his ground because he already knew his blade would split just like that. Everyone stared in shock as Tokola gazed at the blade like it was priceless, and the girls behind him erupted into applause for the blacksmith's flawless work. Then, one of them stepped forward and boldly asked for the weapon for herself. Tokola shouted to Salela that the girl was a mage. Then they were baffled about why she'd even grab a weapon. But she only shrugged and admitted she was just curious, like maybe this treasure trove held something made for her. The young man slipped into the warehouse's back room and declared it wasn't exactly a weapon. Belle lifted her protective staff and snapped, asking what the girl thought. Belle admitted the staff wasn't exactly a beauty, but it could still shield Salela from any magical or physical strike. Salela just stared in awe like, "Wow, it all sounds perfect." The other girl, besides Altera, blurted that she wanted her own weapon too, so Belle grinned, thinking, "You're over 20, and yet you're acting like a kid." The young man snapped a tiny tool into view and blurted that even if she begged, the guy would only turn up this, nothing else. The girl squinted and said it looked like a weird little shape she'd never seen before. Altera admitted the item looked downright weird, but she figured, just like Belle's other weapons, it had to be hiding some seriously interesting power. The guy told her these weapons are called kunai, and all 6 of them are enchanted. Each one carries a magic trick you can only use once, and the girl practically lit up, saying she loved it. Belle spun around and stared at Altera, asking what the girls liked, while the others were already stepping aside, flaunting their brand new clothes like trophies. The girl claimed she was a spirit mage and an archer. She just needed a staff and a bow, no big deal. And since she already had her trusty favorites, she told them not to bother. Tokola swore it was true, pointing out the girl could hold her own even by herself, and Salela nodded hard, bragging that she held the top rank in the whole crew. Belle could barely believe how strong that girl was, and when things finally settled, he admitted he still had something. Then the guy held up a round object and swore it would save you on any journey. He snatched up the bracelet and claimed it was a portable toilet, and the whole room froze. Everyone stared at Belle in stunned disbelief. He told them a female adventurer he knew pushed him to build it, and she made it crystal clear that this kind of artifact is basically a must-have for mixed groups. Salela slipped it onto her hand, and the guy bragged that it could fix her problem and make it effortless to use. Just slap it on, then say, "Activate camouflage." Salela obeyed Belle to the letter, and then a massive camouflage ball snapped into place around her, hiding her completely from sight. Belle said there was a pot inside too, one that stayed totally invisible to everyone around, so nothing eerie ever wafted through the air or clanked into the silence. Then the guy clutched a tiny bag of cash and told the girls they were slipping, so he'd hand it over for free, apologizing as he did it, and Altera snapped that Belle looked straight up like the devil. The boy asked what the girls planned next, and Altera shot back that they'd probably hunt the goblins, because everyone else was itching to test the new weapons. While the girls hovered by the door, practically begging Altera to head for the mountain, she spun around, flashed a grin, and told Belle not to fret. She promised they'd pull off his request. He grinned and said he finally believed her, then admitted she was a pro at what she did, before he tossed the whole thing to Altera, and it instantly made her blush all over again. Every kid in the Bella family, plus Mom, stood up and waved as they watched the guests walk out, and Tokola muttered that the boy turned out to be a real gigolo, while Salila shot back, "Don't ever underestimate young ones." The moment the guests vanished, Belle figured he finally deserved to breathe. He slung the axe over his shoulder, shrugged off the work for later, and let the quiet settle in like a victory. The young man dropped onto the grass, flopped flat like he owned the quiet and felt safe, until quick footsteps snapped the calm away with a jolt. Panting like he'd run for his life, the man yelled the boy's name, and the moment the sound hit, the boy sprang up as he heard him closing in. Belle demanded to know what happened and why he was rushing like that. Sweat poured down his face as he choked out the truth. This was a horrible accident. Then he crumpled to the ground and rasped that goblins had just hit the sawmill. Chappelle also caught screams from the backyard and tore over there, heart pounding. She demanded to know what happened, and Belle snapped that she'd made it just in time, took command immediately, and her brother had been sent off to the sawmill. Belle snapped into action, casting a quick spell to build a little board-like platform, then tore toward the sawmill, launching through the air like a bullet. When he showed up, Uncle Zabar was right there. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted him instantly. The kid bolted toward him, firing off, "Is everything okay?" And Zabar calmly said they'd already shoved back the first attack. But their side still paid the price. People were down everywhere, so he crouched near a man sprawled on the ground and snapped, "He took the medicine, but he bled out anyway." Belle crouched and stared at the wound, grimacing at how deep it went, like the monsters were swinging real weapons. Zabar nodded and said he was right. The goblins were moving in tiny squads, too coordinated, like something was pulling their strings. Then Belle shoved himself upright, claiming he was finished with the man's wounds, his own body already wrapped in bandages, before telling the injured guy he had to sleep and rest for 5 straight days. Zabar said he got it and apologized for bothering him, and Belle snapped that it was worth it anyway, because every time he does stuff like that, he picks up a ton of new lessons, while Zabar kept showering him with praise. Bragging that nobody could ever match him, the man suddenly snapped his eyes wide open, and Belle hurriedly demanded why, thinking maybe something was stuck on his face. The moment Zabar spotted Belle's hands, he blared a warning at him from the spot. Someone was closing in from behind. Then Belle suddenly jerked around to face boom! An explosion ripped through the air, and Belle got launched forward several meters. Zabar snapped to him, panicked, asking if he was all right, while Belle stayed seated, groaning under his breath. The goblin lingered behind, dressed in matching uniform, and when that brutal hit didn't take Belle, shock flashed across his face. Then he remembered how the boy tore through it all, even carrying off his brother Rix. He started shaking himself off and snapped, "Get out of here!" Then he warned that adventurers were in the forest, and that he could tell them Belle was right now battling the ogre. Zabar shot into a sprint right away, crashing through the tree branches, and the ogre mocked him the whole time, sneering that he was holding out well for a guy who was about to drop dead any second. The ogre strutted with arrogant confidence and told Belle not to worry, saying the monster would handle everything without a single ounce of pain. Then the boy's grin flickered as a punch came flying at him out of nowhere. Belle yanked himself to the side and barely slipped past that lightning-fast hand. Then the orc's eyes widened because he instantly got what Belle was aiming for, and the kid's speed left him stunned. The ogre kept flinging his arms and shouting for the boy to stop running, sneering that Belle was a pathetic worm, then kept swinging again and again, landing nothing. Right after that, Bell decided to prove he wasn't just watching. He shot his arm out, planted one palm in front of him, and slammed the ogre's massive fist to a stop. The ogre's fist started to tremble, like it couldn't even hold on as it tried to shove the boy aside. And when it realized it couldn't, it snapped that stopping him was too easy, then turned and hissed that the kid in front of it was the real monster. Bella only laughed at all those words aimed at him, still clenching his fist as he grinned, because this huge ogre was the one calling the boy a monster. Right after the adventurers stumbled into the area, they spotted a terrifying, shaking 3-meter hunk of armor, so the girls crept closer, ready to grill someone about what was happening. And the guy finally introduced them to the ogre. Staring at the remote, the boy blurts that every guy in the world dreams of owning a robot of his own, and Bell shrugs like it's nothing. He just shoved it into the armor, and everything worked out even better than he'd imagined. Bell thought he could get that ogre to chop down the forest and make up for the sawmill damage, until Altera came charging over, yelling at him mid-plan, and Bell flinched hard. The boy felt her bloodlust hit him like a storm, and with shaky nerves he blurted that he was only messing around with the ogre, while Altera kept closing in, wearing nothing but a grim, serious face. Belle leaned in and asked the girl if she'd been offended in any way. She snapped back, "No." Then she rose and prayed to the side, begging the guy to somehow survive this fight. Altera had already slipped a couple of meters ahead, and Belle shot his hand out between them, trying to steady her with a promise that they could sort everything out calmly. Altera was trembling with rage, and the moment she heard from Zabar that the guy was fighting an ogre, she and everyone came barreling in, only to arrive and see the truth. He wasn't battling at all. He was just toying with the ogre. Still trembling, she snapped that Belle could play with them. She was fuming. Then, Belle caught tears spilling from her eyes as she admitted they were terrified. She lashed out and started beating him, yelling that he didn't even get how terrified they were, and Belle tried to shut down and beg for help because he was hurting, but Altera kept going. After that, the girl burst into even louder tears, then confessed that, in the end, she was just relieved he was safe and unhurt, so Belle immediately started piling on apologies to her. Meanwhile, Mother drilled Tuta with orders. Don't go playing hero on a whim. His only job is recon. The boy stood tall, locking eyes with his mother like a champion, and she warned him, "Don't you even think about fighting those monsters if they show up in the forest." Then the boy promised he'd listen for sure, while his mom barked for him to get back home before sunset, and turned to Belle, telling her she couldn't stop worrying about what's been happening lately. Rumors of monsters lurking near the village lit a firestorm among the people, because even Altera's group and the other adventurers patrolling the area weren't enough to shut them up. Belle figured he had to confront the caged ogre again, because every time he stayed silent, that poor monster's hope kept crumbling. At that exact moment, the mother snapped his name and told him flat out she wasn't going to remind him that cruel treatment is a terrible idea. Period. Belle spun around and said, "Yeah, of course I know. Any decent person would." Then the guy's eyes hardened, because even with a promise to his mother hanging over him, they still needed answers, or this was going to turn into violence. Nobody could figure out why the monsters kept spawning back to back, and the weird part was these two weren't like anything they'd seen before, so their usual tricks weren't going to cut it. That guy swore some strange instinct told him these monsters weren't just beasts, they knew things too, and Belle decided to shove every thought aside and start cracking it all the moment he got to the place. Belle kept charging ahead until his expression snapped into worry. Right in front of him, a girl lay flat on the ground, completely still, with some strange platform right beneath her. The guy stared at the girl with gut-punch pity and instantly thought, this is exactly what common folks call a trap. And then, right on the spot, he decided he couldn't stay away. When Belle spotted that trap, dread hit him like a truck. So he shoved the girl hard, checking fast to see if she was still breathing. She pushed herself up to her feet, and Belle hurried to ask what happened. When she looked totally fine, he figured she'd just fallen asleep right there. Then the girl yanked him by the edge of his cape and spun him around, demanding Belle look at her, her eyes blazing with wild sparkle, her smile totally unhinged. Belle caught the girl staring back with a magical glow in her eyes, snatched her hand, swore he understood everything, and then declared that this was exactly the way she'd been trying to sway him. The girl started to tremble, clueless about what she'd messed up. Then the stranger finally broke the silence and asked why her stare wouldn't work on him. Belle just grinned and told her straight up, bad luck for her, because the second things started going wrong, he threw up a magical barrier and slammed down an interceptor on instinct, thanks to that awful feeling he'd had from the very beginning. The girl started to fight back, but the guy, sniffing out her race, yanked her by the arm and hurled her up, roaring that she'd never get away. The terrified girl hovered in place, snapped her wings open, and blasted away to safety in a heartbeat. The girl sprang onto a tree branch, staring straight at the guy ahead of her. Then Belle grinned and told her it was all meant as a surprise, revealing that she was a succubus. The girl snapped into curses, screaming that she never in a million years thought her magical gaze could fail. Then Belle cut in fast, shouting that he just needed to ask her something. It made his stomach twist, but he kept pleading with the girl to come down until the succubus snapped, screaming that she had a real name and calling herself Charlie. After that, Belle nodded like he finally got it, then turned back to the girl, this time calling her by name, and immediately set his sights on the real mystery: why she was here. Charlie finally sank into the branch and told Belle to bring Rix back, but Belle squinted hard, utterly lost about who the succubus even meant. The boy scratched his head, desperate to remember, while the girl exploded into screams, yelling that he wasn't fooling anyone. She even insisted she knew Belle had beaten him back in the forest. The girl snapped that she wouldn't let Belle mock her comrades. Then it hit the guy like a light bulb, and suddenly he felt like he finally understood what was really going on. The boy blurted that he'd seen it all now, and the girl's dress was downright adorable, leaving the succubus momentarily thrown off. Belle admitted he'd known from the start it was a trap, but he still couldn't look away. He was totally hypnotized by the girl and that dress. She blushed hard and started showing off, grilling him like, "You really believe that?" And the succubus chimed in too, saying the master cooked it up special just for Charlie. Charlie kept going, totally moved, and admitted Belle was dead on. If anyone had taste, it was the master, because he treated her with pure kindness and even hooked her up with tons of amazing clothes. Belle figured he needed answers about the master, and the moment things settled, the succubus flicked her hair loose and confessed she didn't want to wear only cute stuff because, hey, she was a guy too. Belle kept laughing, nerves rattling, and shot back that the master really did have good taste, while Charlie snapped, "Hey, don't blame me, I didn't make him this nice." Belle couldn't take another second of Charlie's nonsense, realized he'd never get real, helpful answers about where monsters come from, and then he raised his hand, snapping the succubus into a cage. Belle whipped around, apologized to the boy, and cut the convo short. He said he didn't have time to gush about how adorable and beautiful his master's clothes were. After that, Belle, just like Ogre, threw the succubus behind bars, and Charlie fought the chains, screaming for release, while Belle insisted the boy was a demon and nothing but rude. Right after that, the guy crumpled onto the bed, crushed by the weight that slammed down on him. And while Belle begged to learn more about the boss, all he walked away with was petty gossip about what they wore. Belle's eyelids finally started to droop, his mind drifting from that succubus to the incubus, right as his eyes were about to shut when a blood-curdling scream tore through his room. Chappelle kept shrieking, begging Belle to wake up at last. Then the boy snapped around, eyes full of disappointment, and demanded, "So what happened now?" The girl blared that they were in trouble, shocking even Belle because Tuda still hadn't come back from hunting, and right after that, Belle snapped into action, throwing herself into gear and even waking up mid-prep. The older brother strode down the hallway, grilling the girl for how long it had been since sunset, and she guessed about an hour before handing him an arrow she'd found near the house. When Belle saw the tiny thing on the arrow's base, he yanked the paper free, and the moment it unfolded, he realized it was a letter meant to challenge him. The sister was about to ask what was on that paper, but the guy just grinned and waved it off, saying Belle was certain Tuda would be back home before long. Mom was still up, and she asked her son if everything would be okay. Then Belle stepped in and told her not to worry, and that woman's face instantly lit up with a smile. Bell fixed himself a steaming drink before he started packing. Because even if he'd told them not to worry, how could he sit still when he knew their enemies were about to come crashing in? A knock hit the door, and the hosts blurted for the guest to come in since it still wasn't locked. Then something unknown slid onto the threshold, and it bowed and apologized for barging in. The slime apologized for showing up so late, and Bell froze, speechless, just staring. Then it asked if everything was okay, and only after that did Bell start to realize what kind of creature he'd been dealing with. "Sit down," she said, then admitted she'd totally dropped her manners, while the monster, Bamble, introduced himself and claimed he was their master's butler and guard. Bell forced an awkward grin and blurted that he was ready to dive into business immediately. Then the man started grilling him about why the butler even showed up at their house. Slime said she came to get Bell to free Rix and Charlie, and Bell got it. This mess was on them. But the butler, speaking for the master, was already willing to pay a solid price. Bell shot up his index finger and reminded them. Those monsters had attacked them first. So now it was hilarious, in a grim way, that they were begging to be let go, and Bell said it was pure selfishness. Bell slumped against the table, chin in his hand, and started plotting what he could squeeze out of their master, especially after the guy flat out said he didn't care about money, just like the slime had predicted. Then the butler snapped his hands up and pitched his own idea, and the monster shrugged that they could stay in debt and still show up on call, no questions asked, to come to the rescue. Bell nodded and agreed. The monster blinked in shock that it all ended so smooth. Bell hustled over for the teapot, declared it was a done deal, then poured the butler a drink and offered him a helping hand. Then the butler bowed again to Bella, admitting it was careless of him to act like that. Yet the slime still had the nerve to ask for something else. Bell blinked in shock and pressed the butler for answers, but the butler only said he wanted Bell to come back for another visit, leaving Bell utterly baffled about why any of it mattered. That slime took a shaky sip from its mug, nerves creeping up fast. Sure, it claimed its master was a dungeon master, but it admitted things have been falling apart lately. Bell folded his hands, shut his eyes tight, and swore he understood it all. The boy promised he'd help the dungeon's inhabitants crack whatever this was. Then the butler hurriedly thanked him. Bell slammed his mug down and swore he'd only meet the demands once he could see his brother, while Slime muttered an awkward, "We're really sorry," with a shaky, embarrassed grin. Bell let Charlie and Rick go like he promised, but Incubus burst into tears, clung to Bamble, and spilled everything. How terrified he was to end up here. The butler started frantic hand-waving, begging Charlie to calm down, while Rick thought they were setting Bell up, until Bamble stepped in and ordered the ogre to apologize to the boy. Rick trembled as he demanded to know why it had to be him. Then the butler cut him off, saying there'd be no. Pointing right at Incubus, the slime snarled that Charlie would have to apologize to Bell, too. Charlie kept the slime clutched in his hands, and right then, the butler turned to Bell. Bamble leaned in and asked the boy if he could take him straight down to their dungeon. Bell asked for a moment, stared deep into the forest, and shouted that he knew the ones hiding there, so the guide demanded they come out. And out stepped a crew of adventurers who looked shocked by how fast and sharp he was. He jabbed a finger at the spot where the bracelet always sat, and grinned like he'd won. And Bell swore, yeah, he'd made it, so he could spot those things without even trying. He slapped his hand to his belt and snapped, demanding the girls explain why they were tailing him and that pack of monsters, while Altera shot back right away that they refused to let him wander off alone into something that deadly. Then the dark-haired elf scanned the boy, locked her gaze on Bamble, and asked, way too menacingly, if they could jump in with everyone. The slime shot back that there'd be no problem at all. Bamble, still cradled in Charlie's arms, gave a tiny wave and promised, "We'll around be happy to see Bell's friends." Bell grinned wide as soon as he heard it and said, "Since we're all here together, we're ready. Let's head straight for the dungeon." The girls nodded in agreement. And just like that, they plunged into the dark dungeon, with Charlie dragging them forward while the guy assured Altera, "Don't sweat it, we're only here to talk." The girl insisted it was still the dungeon master, and then Bell snapped that since she'd brought the subject up, she needed to spell out exactly who the dungeon master was. Altera leaned in and declared this was the Monster King's doorstep, buried deep beneath the ground. Plus, she warned, some of them packed serious magic. Then Bamble grinned, started waving his hands like a cheerleader, and blurted out that the guests had finally made it. The boy froze, staring in shock with eyes as wide as saucers, because what he was seeing felt unreal, like the world had just thrown him the impossible. The girls gawked when the butler pointed at the dungeon's shape, and they started whispering theories fast. Could it be a tower? Or ancient ruins? This was the first time they'd ever seen something like it. Altera leaned in and grilled Bell, asking if he knew anything about the weird stuff. Bell just grinned and admitted he didn't even know how to put it into words for the girl. Bell grinned way too wide, nerves buzzing, and admitted he felt déjà vu, while this dungeon, somehow, was just an ordinary apartment building from somewhere else that had landed in his world. Altera snapped his name again, and worry hit him hard. Then Bell let out a breath, apologized, and admitted he just needed a minute to think. Once his thoughts finally lined up, they headed inside. BVM Bell shot his hand up, motioning the guy this way for the entrance, while Incubus and Ogre yanked the building's door open, making it look, to Bell, just like the run-of-the-mill dorms back in his old world. The moment they stepped in, the boy clocked a tiny sign that read, Itoki Dormitory, and right at the entrance the girl snapped back that the master was holed up in his room. The girl shot the guests a bright greeting, introducing herself as Kyoko, manager and part-time guard, and Storm Bell was stunned, because she was guarding the dungeon herself. The girl leaned in and claimed she was a rare creature the master himself forged, so she stood fearless in her power. Then she flashed a grin and clenched her fist right in front of you. As they trekked deeper, Alterus warned them to stay razor-sharp because messing with their master, the one running that dungeon, was a deadly mistake. There was even a working elevator in this building, and he couldn't help thinking, if all her assistants had a thing like that, then the master's skills would blow his mind. As they pushed deeper in, Bell couldn't shake the worry for Tout. He had to be around here somewhere. The boy spotted the mess in the room, but Bamble just shrugged and said the master hated it when anyone touched her things. Tuta heard his brother and bolted straight to him, and Bell wrapped him in a tight hug, relieved he was alive and okay. Then Tuta begged his brother for help, hiding from someone nearby. A girl chased after the boy, screaming questions like, "Where did you go?" And she called him Seta in this weird sing-song way, like the kind of name little boys throw around in Japanese fantasy daydreams. Altera shot forward, yanking her blade into the fight, and Bamble instantly sprang up to block her, shielding his master and saving the girl in glasses. Altera slashed with everything she had, but the butler snapped his blade up and blocked it. Then he demanded she calm down and drop the weapon, and Altera insisted their master struck first. The girl clapped her hand over her mouth, blurting out what she should do next as she chased her Seta. And then she jolted, trembling, because a written beauty had suddenly appeared in the room. He stared at that girl like she was completely out of her mind, then flat out told her she wasn't even in his plans, before spinning around and declaring it was time to leave. Altera didn't move, blade still gripped in her hand, then told Bell, "If anything goes wrong, just whistle, and I'll come down on our master in a flash." He pushed right past everyone at the door and declared this was real nostalgia. Then he snapped that he couldn't accept it, because how in the world did he end up meeting another reincarnated person like this? The girl stared at the boy with pure awe, then burst out, asking if he'd been reincarnated too. Bell dropped his head and told her to stop shouting, because she could wake Tout. He even told her it felt like they shared the same past, because the stuff in her room kept dragging him back to that old life and lighting up a wave of nostalgia. Then Belle snapped at the girl, claiming she'd been through the same mess as him, yet she'd already turned spoiled and lost her mind. And the girl shot back that Belle had thrown out his first opinion way too early. After that, the girl dropped into her seat and blurted out that she'd never introduced herself. The master smiled and said her name, Shigemochi, Irina. She knew everything had been crazy, but she was still hoping she and Belle could finally get along. She pleaded with Belle for protection, whispering that every kind of hero and plenty of monsters were closing in on her, and Belle couldn't stop herself from wondering why the whole world wanted her gone. She said the real disaster is so simple it hurts. She just exists. Then she swallowed hard and admitted the truth. Her body's troubles trace back to the wishes she made during reincarnation. Belle pressed her again, so she finally started listing her wishes, and the very first thing she demanded from God was to be reborn with her own body. So yeah, she wasn't just undead, she was a lich, plain and simple. Irina slammed the table and snapped that she looked human, but underneath, she was a monster. Belle said, "Yeah, then there are perks, like a huge mana reserve and the body's special features." And Irina nodded along, until she snapped, "But the real problem is my diet." Liches siphon the life force of others with brutal energy drains. But here's the catch. She could only do it inside her own dungeon, and that limitation trapped her in a web of problems. The guy claimed she'd feel totally at ease here, and right then Irina snapped it. This was her second wish, because places like this felt downright perfect to her. Then the girl grinned and bragged that she could summon even more servants for herself, like she was having the time of her life, while the guy exploded into furious curses, screaming that it was all pointless if she couldn't defend herself. The girl blurted that she was sick with shame, but Belle wouldn't linger. He grabbed his brother, told him he couldn't fix it, and then shouted his goodbye like he was ripping free. Bamble shoved Belle to listen, admitted everything felt messed up, but all they'd ever done was scrape by, hurried from one place to the next, until they finally found their home, and now they'd defend it no matter what. Bamble lunged for Belle, begging him. There was nowhere else to run, and they needed the boy's power. So Belle stared for a moment, then nodded and promised to help the dungeon's people. Suddenly, a goblin who looked exactly like one Belle knew burst into the room, yelling that trouble was here, and before Belle could even blink, he recognized him, along with the goblin gripping a torn-off horn, demanding what Belle was doing there. Bamble snapped, telling him Rix was ahead of the master, and the goblin blurted an apology right away, then rushed to explain they'd spotted a pack of orcs near the dungeon and were coming straight here. The news hit the girl like a punch, and she finally blurted that someone had been stalking her non-stop. Altera yanked him hard and blurted that they had to escape right now because the orcs were pure danger, while Irina barked at him to get her through this threat. Belle demanded how many orcs and Ricks there were, and Rick shot back that it was around 81, plus 5 of their kind. Then Belle realized every single one counted as a top-tier soldier, with a handful of mages tagging along too. He figured the only move was to charge straight ahead. But when he spoke, he swore he wouldn't fight. He'd still help, and with a flick of magic, he yanked weapons straight out of his warehouse. The boy thrust the sword forward and ordered the arena fighters to trap the orcs alive so their master could feast on them for a long time. Once he handed out guns to everyone, he told them they could take it from here, on their own. Then Charlie said if the guy was finished, he could head back home. After a bit, they were already heading down the street toward home, and then Belle blurted that their master was totally strange. Altera just stared in shock, because somehow he could actually talk to Lich. Finally, Tudo jolted awake after that brutal dungeon nap, rubbed the sleep out of his eyes, and boom, his stomach started growling like crazy. Because all he could manage to say was, "I'm starving." Belle flashed a grin and told him to hang in there, since they were basically home now. Chappelle and his mom had to have something cooked up for him, no matter the hour. The Bella family carried on with their usual routine. Tucola and the other girls dashed outside and demanded they head into the forest right now to patrol it. And Belle told them to go have fun, while Chappelle just waved her hand like, "Let's do this." Mother stared at the blazing sun and squinted, grinning as she said today was perfect for washing. Chappelle beamed right back, saying the clothes would dry in a flash as long as the sunlight stayed this strong. Suddenly, the girl spotted something off on the road, and Belle couldn't figure out what Chappelle was trying to warn him about. She just knew she'd seen a bunch of carriages and wondered who could have come. Then one carriage pulled up to their house and screeched to a stop. The door swung open, and the man Belle already knew stepped out, Chappelle grinning like he just won. Then a tall fellow with light eyes slowly rose from the carriage, Uncle Laval, the merchant. The man started waving like crazy, and Belle shot back with a smile, asking how he was doing. But when he finally got close, she realized he wasn't alone. He'd hauled a whole crowd with him, and Bell told him it should have been a gift only if he'd shown up by himself. Abel leaned in and said anything could happen, and the merchant snapped the others to introduce themselves. Then the guy beside Abel started fumbling through his intro like he was terrified, and Bell couldn't figure out what he was so scared of. Then the young man ripped off his headdress and roared that he was the merchant's apprentice, while the boy dipped his head and admitted it was a huge honor to finally meet Bell. Bell flicked his hand, telling the boy to chill and insisting the kid didn't need to be so polite. Avel then pushed for calm, saying his student was only nervous, first day on the job. Once the boy slid his headdress back on, Abel leaned in and told him, straight up, that one day he'd take Abel's place. So that's why Bell could treat him however he needed to. Bell blinked in shock. Then the kid pushed the merchant again, demanding, "So you'll really replace me?" Abel nodded and said yes, because he was done with the trading game and was heading to the settlement to open his own shop. Bell couldn't catch a word of what the merchant was saying, because how would he possibly know plans like that yet? Something felt off, sure, but Abel was already ready to spill the truth. Then, bam! Another man stepped out of the carriage. A short-haired girl blinked at him and demanded, "What happened?" She introduced herself as Serenilla, then added that her husband had told her tons about Bell, leaving Bell stunned because Abel was the one who'd actually gotten married. The merchant scratched the back of his head, froze for a beat, then wrapped his arms around his wife and declared, Rastinia, they were officially married now. Bell started spiraling into panic, yelling that everything hit way too fast for him, while Abel shrugged it off like, "Yeah, it already happened. What's the issue?" Instead, the guy burst into clapping and snapped that Aval should have told him about this amazing news sooner, so he could have congratulated them the way they deserved. Abel's cheeks burned with shame, and right after that, Chappelle blurted out congratulations. The moment the merchant spotted the girl, he froze in shock. Sedania shot back, "What happened?" Bell stepped forward and said Abel finally brought his wife home. Then Abel snapped at the guy to stop. Soon, everyone hustled toward the house to finally rest up, and Mother beamed, saying the travelers must be worn out from the road. Then the woman's voice stayed calm as she told them, "Just make yourselves at home." Aval's assistant blurted that a big deal was about to hit, so he had to vanish for a bit. Mother stared in shock because she thought the boy was just running off, but Aval snapped back that it was all to make sure nobody else felt left out. The boy marched up to Bell, then begged him to walk to the heart of the settlement and see everything for himself. So Bell nodded and agreed, and right as they started, the assistant leaned in and whispered that he had something to tell Bell, and he wanted Bell's honest opinion. The cart lurched to life, and just a couple minutes down the road, the guy finally started talking. Avel's assistant leaned in and swore he'd built a surprise for his boss, and the boss's fiancé. Bell pressed him again, and the boy blurted out that ever since then they've been sprinting from place to place, so Avel and Serenilla never really got the chance to throw their wedding ceremony. That's why the boy blurted out that he really wanted to do something for the two of them, because after everything Abel and his wife had done for him, he felt like he finally owed them. Bell started to tremble a little, like it could feel the boy's heart, and he realized just how kind this kid was. Then Bell rested a hand on his shoulder, told him to trust him, and promised them the best party ever. Bell suggested they blend the wedding party with a big welcome for their arrival, pulling the whole village together. And now it was all about outfits, so the assistant asked, "Can we get you ready today?" Bell grinned and said it was pure coincidence. Right up the road, a girl with a basket on her shoulders was walking ahead, and Bell immediately recognized her as Tuala, a local craftswoman, then called out to her hard. The girl spun around and snapped, "What is it?" Bell started talking, saying out of nowhere they'd asked her to get ready to make the wedding dress today, and she apologized for the shock, but she insisted it was for Avila's wife. The girl leaned in and asked the merchant straight up if he was truly going to marry, then flashed a smug smile and said she had the perfect outfit for the occasion, and she was sure it would be amazing because Bell was counting on her. Abel's apprentice went rigid on the spot and blurted, "Who's that, Bell?" The boy shot back that he didn't even get a chance to say hello. Bell smiled and told Walla she was Abel's childhood friend, the seamstress with golden hands. The young man swore he'd do anything to help Bell, then leaned in and pressed for what happened next. What would become of his comrade? The cart started wheezing to a stop and Bell jumped off. The guy told him the assistant was heading out alone, just climb the hill and the colony would be waiting for him. Bell shot the boy a quick wave, promised they'd meet again, then bolted toward the trees. Meanwhile, the boy spun to Salabaria and demanded how long she planned to keep hiding. The girl shot Bell a glare and snapped, with dripping sarcasm, that he was always way too busy, and Bell just had to ask what on earth finally bit her to make her start acting like this. Suddenly, Bell clocked it. She cut her hair. Bell leaned in and asked what she thought of her new style, and the girl beamed like it was the best decision ever, then flipped it back on him. So, how does it look on me? Bell stared at Sally Berry and blurted out that she looked adorable, and the guy tossed in, I never would have guessed you're this skilled. While Sally Berry just soaked up the compliments, Bell suddenly snapped and came up with an amazing idea. The girl kept smiling and told the young man not to quit. So Belle stepped in and said she could do something for him, then begged to style Saranella's hair until it shone, and Sallyberry clenched her teeth. Sallyberry frowned and demanded, with growing annoyance, who this girl was that Belle wouldn't stop talking about. Then the young man snapped back that she was Avila's wife, and they were dying to throw a party to celebrate both the wedding and her grand arrival. Sallyberry spun away, and Belle missed the jealous flicker in her eyes. Then Sally demanded they tell everyone right now. She yanked Belle's hand and shot back, "Where's it happening?" Belle couldn't wrap her head around why she was rushing so hard. Sallyberry blurted that they couldn't afford to slow down. This guy didn't even get how much had to be done for the wedding. And Sallyberry figured it would be downright rude to show Abel and his wife up with half-hearted effort. Right when they got home, Serenilla and Chappelle rushed to greet them and said dinner was almost ready. Serenia gripped the knife tight and demanded where Bach was, and Belle snapped back that he was probably still running behind, then told her to put the blade down. Right after the request, Serenilla finally clocked how it looked, and panic hit her hard. She blurted out that she didn't mean to act that clueless. Sharp objects were the last thing she wanted to greet guests with, so fear took over. Then Chappelle stepped in and soothed her. Avelle stepped into the room, and Belle snapped her head toward him at once, telling him his wife was a bit unusual. Avelle admitted the girl came from noble blood, so she wasn't used to getting her hands on a bunch of everyday work. Abel also begged Belle to try teaching the girl if she could, and the merchant couldn't stop thinking, once Belle caught on, how could he possibly pretend he didn't know whose daughter she was? Belle whipped around with a sly grin, twirled his finger, and said he never would have guessed about that veil because the guy was really out here trying to snatch the gold. Staring at the girl, the merchant said Serenilla had fled home to chase her dream of becoming a doctor, and the boy thanked her parents because they disinherited her and dared her to never come back. After that, Avil paused for a beat and admitted, straight up, that he'd fallen for this girl's spirit, seeing everything she'd endured, and Belle whipped around in shock, staring at his friend standing right behind him. Belle tried to block him, begging him over and over not to fall for her again, while Avile barked that he should stop lecturing his elders and just quietly build his cozy little nest. Belle grinned and told him, "Then he'll finally hand me the chance to build you a house," and promised he'd handle everything, making it his wedding gift, with Tuda right there to help. Belle asked Oval where he wanted to live, and the second the question hit, Oval demanded he wanted everything right next to Belle. Then he pushed further, asking the Lord for permission to build a house. Belle even joked that if Serenilla was a doctor, they could set up a whole clinic while the boy was still here, so Avil's wife exploded into thrilled screams, totally stunned it could actually happen. The girl clasped her hands and admitted she'd been dreaming of her own clinic for ages, and then Thao grinned at the couple and told him it would take a little time. Belle smiled again. Then that guy dropped another bombshell. He had one more gift for their wedding, and he needed the newlyweds ready right now, because Avao in a Serenia stood there stunned, not sure what else Belle could possibly offer them. Belle and Tuda had already kicked off building a brand new home for Aval. Then Belle snapped his head up, stared into the forest, and spotted a group of people marching straight toward them. These were the adventurers who started waving like crazy, and Belle shot them a grin. He was so happy they were back. The girl blurted out that it felt amazing to finally have someone waiting because for the first time in ages, they didn't feel lost. They felt like home. Suddenly, a brand new building popped up right next to Belle's house, and the girl stared at him in shock because that place wasn't there that morning. Aval stepped outside, clocked the girl, and instantly realized, yep, Bella's guests were here. Tukola pressed a hand to her chest, smiled, and said she was thrilled to meet him, then proudly introduced her crew. Light in the impenetrable darkness. Aval couldn't believe it. It was really them. The guy blurted out that he never in a million years thought he'd run into slaughter maidens here, and Tukola snapped, saying not to call them that. Belle closed in and demanded to know what the guy meant, and Aval shot back that Belle had to be from the backwoods, because this squad was made of real celebrities. Aval said the rumors were true. Those girls annihilated the neighboring country's goblin forces, and they did it with just 4 of them. Legends exploded around their names, and people raised them up with nothing but respect. Belle paused for a beat, then said he must be damn lucky to have people like them standing guard over him. Altera's cheeks flared as she started waving her hands, embarrassed, and begged the guy to stop, because they really weren't that amazing. Chappelle bolted into the yard and yelled for her brother, saying Sallyberry had just pulled up, and when Belle asked how everything was coming, Chappelle shot back that all they had to do was haul the food out. Belle spun toward the girls and told them they could help him today, and the whole squad perked up fast. Then the girls dug into every detail of what they had to do. Belle grinned and said, "If you've got more questions, ask Chappelle." And then the bell snapped, eyeing him suspiciously like, "So what are you and the others hiding from me?" Then he spun around and said the moment had finally arrived, right when Bach barreled in, running up, and blurted out an apology for being late. Belle said the young man showed up at the exact right moment, and the folks trailing behind Bach erupted in solemn cries, cheering him on. Then, Avala with the wedding began. The headman lifted a bottle high and declared they brought nothing but top-shelf wine. Every villager kept grinning, and right then Belle burst out that it was time to celebrate the man's wedding. So he invited the entire village to gather, congratulate them, and celebrate together. Aval swallowed his irritation, then glanced down, only for the man to snap that he'd heard nothing about it. Belle shot back right away, yelling that it was supposed to be a surprise. Belle flashed a grin and told Aval, "You can't even picture who dreamed up this idea. Thank Bach for it." Baka trotted up with a tiny bouquet of wildflowers, shoved them into Aval's hands, and cheered as he congratulated his elder on the wedding. Then he wished that his marriage to Serenilla would be nothing but happiness, and Aval couldn't help but get deeply touched by the sweet gift. The man burst into happy tears, and Belle snapped that it was way too soon since the hero had just walked in. Then Aval spun around and saw his bride, while Belle cracked up and yelled for him to go greet his lady. That hit him so hard he couldn't even get a word out. Serenia looked absolutely stunning in the dress Tula stitched for her, while petals rained down from the sky and the bride inched toward her groom, step by trembling step. The girl grinned and sprinted straight into Avala's arms, leaving the merchant stunned as she pulled on the outfit. Then she solemnly yelled how cute and traditional the settlement clothes were, and Belle turned around like, "Of course I'd expect this from my 2 childhood friends," while Tula added that they always gave it their all, and Sally Berry swore she worked hard too. He accepted his wife's presents, turned to the master of the house, and said he didn't even know how he could ever thank Belle and everyone else for throwing that celebration. The man admitted he didn't know how to thank the whole village, then broke down into tears again, only for Belle to snap, "Hold on, it's way too soon to cry, because the boys are throwing a party for our arrival." Next, everyone burst into celebration, petals flying as Belle shouted for the whole village to hit the dance floor, not stopping until they collapsed laughing, then roaring their joy at the amazing event. After the party, the fresh family hurried into their brand new house, and Serenilla burst inside, demanding where to stash the boxes. Aval shot back that everything had to go on the first floor. Belle jumped in to help and then asked, "All right, where do we put the books?" 4 days after the wedding, the guys finally hammered the last nail into the Avala house, and when it stood complete, everyone cheered. The bride and groom couldn't stop smiling, loving every bit of it. While the main building's ground floor got handed to the Avala Trading Company, Saranilla Hospital went up nearby, and then, just as they were settling in, a loud noise snapped in behind them. The girl let her things clatter to the ground, then hurried over to Abel and blurted out that she'd ruined everything again, over and over. Abel shook it off, telling her not to sweat the little stuff. Then Belle flashed a smile and said he'd already figured it out. The boys loved each other. The boy told them to hit pause and try again later because their stuff was still scattered all over the house. Belle stared around and realized this house was packed with books. He never would have guessed Abel devoured them. And then, right out of nowhere, he spotted something even stranger. The boy stared at one book wrapped in a glittering magical barrier, and it hit him hard with shock. Then Abel leaned in and said he'd have Saranilla put one there for him. Belle shot a question. Who was this Val trying to sell a miracle to? The guy just lifted the book with the picture, said it was meant for mermaids, then admitted he'd once dreamed of trading with them. Right after that, Abel snapped. I just remembered one thing. Back then, that guy begged Bella to let him use that tiny house the boy had been standing in at the harbor. Avil also promised he'd definitely cough up the rent from the profits, and the merchant practically latched onto the deal. Now he's just sitting there, staring at Belle, waiting for an answer. After that, Belle told everyone, people can't read underwater, so trust me, this is going to be in high demand. So he convinced himself that all of this was setting him up for a fate so good it felt inevitable. But right then, Belle shot up a finger and said the truth. One of the problems still wasn't fixed. Not yet. Aval stared at him in shock, then leaned in to figure out exactly what he meant. Belle awkwardly forced a smile and admitted, right now, the mermaid world is still locked in war, so trading with them would cause a whole lot of trouble. Abel couldn't believe how fast everything flipped, and Belle tried to cram the whole story into a few quick words. Right now, countries across the globe are waging war beneath the sea, and the ocean isn't stopping them. Then he threw out an example like their kingdoms on Earth had suddenly ignited into intense, high-stakes relations. Where Belle's house clung to the harbor, people treated it like the end of the sea, so Abel never expected the war to crawl that far, and Belle insisted that right then, all they were doing was stocking up on weapons and medicine. Belle kept going, insisting nobody would dare buy a book at a time like that. Then Aval's face went white, and Belle rushed to apologize, saying only a handful of people would buy them at all. Aval said, with a heavy sigh, that starting a business right then was a nightmare, and he had no clue it was that bad. Belle shrugged and promised they'd lock in for the harbor tomorrow and go take a look. The next day slammed into existence. The boys burst into the harbor and Belle jabbed at a nearby house like, "This is the one Abel told me about. Perfect!" He said some of it was swallowed by the water, meaning he could trade with the mermaids living there. Abel caught every word. Then Aval grilled him, asking if he'd really have to stay submerged for ages, since Belle definitely knew he couldn't last holding his breath for hours. Out on the pier, Abel climbed out of the water and had no idea they were Belle. Only the boy stared and swore they looked like a bunch of squids. And Belle? She clocked the same girls and thought they looked seriously shady. Right then, the two mermaids yanked out their weapons and aimed them straight at the two guys. Abel warned that the mermaids were about to strike, and Belle nodded like, "Yeah, I figured." Then it hit them. The boys were in real trouble. So two girls sprinted right toward them. Then Belle barked, "Run!" and yanked the boy by the hand, and the boy grinned, saying, "We're jumping down right now." Aval shouted back, "I can't swim!" Just like that, it was already over. No time left, so they dove straight into the water. As soon as they sank underwater, Abel blurted that he could breathe here, and Belle grinned, saying he'd wrap the boy's entire body in a magical barrier. Abel clocked that those two girls were still hot on their trail, and the boy blared that these squids wouldn't quit. So Belle frantically waved his hand and shouted for them to swim straight toward him. Abel's jaw dropped when the boy showed him an underwater hideout. Belle snapped that it was General Haruri's residence just a short distance away, so there had to be soldiers there waiting. Suddenly, a mermaid yanked Bella into her grip, and panic slammed into him so hard he nearly lost his breath. It was his buddy, a mermaid named The girl shot the guy a question right away. "Did you hurt yourself by accident?" Abel blinked in shock. Belle wasn't just familiar with her. She smiled and said the girl was named the personal secretary of the underwater country's general. The girl pressed on, asking who was with Belle, and the guy shot back that they barely had time to trade names, then told to hide them inside the residence. Belle blurted out a terrifying warning, telling her that squids were hot on their trail. Then snapped back that she saw nothing but the two guys, and the moment that was said, the guy urged them to move now, before it was too late. Shouted that they couldn't go any farther because what waited up ahead was too dangerous. Yanked Belle close and demanded they head back to Earth, while Belle had zero clue what was happening to the girl. And then, everything caught up. Told us that just a short time ago, an empire crushed in, and now everyone's on the hunt for Belle. Avael shouted for everyone to freeze, because he couldn't make heads or tails of what was happening anymore. Then the guy said Belle had told him about some empire, and Belle shot back that it was probably them. But Belle still couldn't shake the question. Why were they hunting him? The girl insisted that, sure, they were a tiny underwater country, but with the gear Belle had handed them, they could crush their enemies in a straight-up fair fight. Then the girl snapped, furious, that the Imperials had already tracked down who was arming their kingdom, so now they were hunting the source of the weapons. And yeah, that meant him. Belle leaned in and asked who the big-shot general was, the one everyone swore would show up. Otherwise, he refused to let the invasion happen, and the girl nodded along, saying the trouble was already on its way. Tears spilled down Orr's face, and the girl blurted that the general had charged her with guarding this place, but the shock hit her so hard she couldn't handle it. Belle told her, "It's not that bad, I can calm you down," and he kept talking her through it. The boys said they only had one job, to wipe the Imperials out of here, and Aval's jaw dropped when he realized Belle wasn't just nearby, he was actually going to face them. Uru begged Belle to shove those thoughts aside, but the girl laughed and said they had over 100 soldiers. No matter how tough the boy was, it wouldn't change a thing. Belle only smiled and swore everything would be fine. He said he wasn't planning to face them fair and square, because it was him, and playing by their rules just wasn't his style. Aval warned that the Sea Empire can't be underestimated. Belle insisted he'd be okay, and then the guy snapped that they'd be safer if they hid somewhere. He burst up to Aval and blurted out, panicking, "What are you going to do, Val?" She hesitated, totally lost on how to even speak to him. Then he smiled and said he was thrilled to meet her, introducing himself as Aval. Aval smiled back and told Belle, "I've known you for ages." And the way he said it made one thing clear. This guy was cooking up a plan in his head, and the merchant in front of them already sensed it. Then he leaned in and told the girl not to stress at all, because if this is the plan he just cooked up, Bella is going to crush it and succeed for sure. Right then, Imperial water beasts swept through the residence, smashing every weapon box and storage spot they could reach. And they weren't done, because they also grabbed all the food and medicine. Right then, their commander barked orders and spotted a guy perched above them, silently watching. And Belle instantly thought, these Imperials are acting like outright bandits. He shot his finger skyward and screamed, "I see a man!" Everyone froze, refusing to believe it could be true, and the crowd instantly decided it had to be the author behind that jaw-dropping weapon. Belle started pushing down toward them, blurted out that he had a message, and the guy snapped at them, "Get out of here right now or you'll feel pain first." The captain bellowed that the boy didn't dare mock the Empire, and then every single one of them surged into the attack, screaming that they'd wipe out this land monkey right now, while Belle just stared, realizing these Imperial fish were pure cruelty. The guy snapped a giant net into place as a shield and flung it at the attackers. Then they scrambled back on the spot. Belle yanked the net up, grinning ear to ear as he shouted that he'd just landed an amazing catch today. He locked her up, cinched her to a rock, and muttered to himself about what to do next. Then, with a low whisper threatening to send the whole army to Japanese rolls, he instantly sparked outrage because people screamed that he was a real barbarian and a devil. Avel and Ur stared at everything unfolding side by side, and the girl's stomach sank. She couldn't believe Belle would say things like that. Avelle shrugged it off fast, telling her not to take it to heart because that guy was just messing around, grinning like a kid who can't help himself. Abel came down and snapped at the boy to stop fooling around like that, and Belle immediately apologized. Then he rushed to say the sun was already up there, so they had to go. Just as they moved, the merchant yanked out his sample book, and out of nowhere, it slipped straight out of his bag. Ryu saw it and lunged for it, shouting that the guy had dropped something. After a closer look, Yor realized this wasn't just any book. It was the kind of shock that leaves you speechless, and she couldn't stop herself. It's incredible. I never in a million years thought I'd find something this amazing underwater. Avelle grinned and said he was thrilled she liked it, then promised he'd sell them to the mermaids, while Yor clutched the book tight, completely lost, as Belle leaned in and declared that Avelle was, without a doubt, a merchant. Said their city was crumbling. Belle snapped back that he could fix things by hauling materials from the land, free of charge. Then the girl lit up like, "That'll help!" Abel stepped in too, promised to join, and said they'd meet again. Avelle smiled and swore he'd never abandon anyone in trouble. Those words left stunned, and heat crept into her cheeks as embarrassment hit. Belle grinned and told Avelle he seemed like a great guy, then turned to and warned, "Hold on to those seahorses while you still can. This merchant is already married." The girl blushed hard at the spot. She snapped that she never even saw it that way. Then the girl called Belle a fool, and the guy just kept laughing like it was hilarious. After a while, every single resident in Belle's house crowded into the kitchen, and Altera seethed because that guy was about to march into that weird dungeon with the Lich Girl again. Belle blew on his scorching drink and said he'd promised them, so he'd step up until they could finally defend themselves. Then Tuda burst into the room shouting for his brother. Tuda said he wanted to go too, and Belle snorted a laugh like, "Yeah, that perverted spot?" Then he started grilling the guy, wondering if he was even okay, because last time he'd been dying to escape and looked totally wiped out. Tuda yanked his shirt tight and admitted, yeah, he was still scared. But he had to march back there to smash that stupid fear and come out stronger. Belle burst into laughter, praising how his brother had nailed a great point, then smirked that there was no way his younger brother would fall short. Altera just watched the whole exchange, grinning. Altera warned that she'd be scared if the boys showed up alone, so she insisted on going with them, and Belle shot back, "Don't worry, I'm counting on a girl." As soon as Belle slipped back into the dungeon, Irina was right there, waiting for him. And then Bamble stepped in, soothing the master back down, and Belle couldn't shake the feeling that nothing had changed since their last visit. The girl beamed at Bella with those same old furious eyes, and told him it had been way too long since they'd last met, while Belle snatched the moment to ask Irina to wipe her drool before greeting him, only to watch her frown and call it rude. Then the girl snapped into a frantic sprint of questions about what brilliant plan Belle had cooked up. Bamble was over the moon too, but the boy shot them all a look and demanded they stay patient. Belle dropped treats on the table and didn't even wait. Then the boy started waving his hands, barking out plans. They had to build a whole city underground and pin it on a country where Itoki would be the capital. Belle pointed straight at the girl and declared she'd rule this whole country one day, and Irina froze in shock as the boy pushed his claim again, while even Altera stared, stunned by how bold his plan was. Belle launched into it right there. Why not use all that land to grow vegetables and raise livestock, bring in real money, and finally afford the protection they needed? After Belle decided that, for once, they didn't have to live in fear of enemies, Bamble still couldn't wrap his head around how they'd even sell the harvest, until Belle snapped, "Dig a tunnel straight to the port, then trade with the mermaids." Irina bolted ahead, practically buzzing with delight. Mermaids actually existed in this world. Belle had told them to kick things off with the tunnel, and the girl echoed it, grinning as they stepped into something that looked like the Geofront from Evangelion. Lich lit up and said she loved the idea, promising she'd pour everything into digging that tunnel, while Belle cut in that she had a far more important mission to handle. Belle let out a smug chuckle, turned to Irina, and the guys pushed the idea hard. She had to jump into intensive training so she'd be able to work outside later. Irina froze at his words. Belle didn't sugarcoat it. It was finally time to work with his own hands, so he'd go all in and stop leaning on everyone else. The girl shot him a warning. She was undead, and one touch of the sun would make her burst into flames. So Belle figured she'd just have to work after sunset, and in his head, he called Irina stupid. Bamble snapped his hands up and yelled for the master to give it a shot, and the girl nodded right along, swearing she'd do everything she could, while Belle just grinned and promised he'd lay out the rest of his ideas next time. Right as they were heading out of the dorm, Tuda grabbed his brother's shirt and tugged hard, then said, "Let's race home," because he'd gotten way faster, and Belle told the kid to prove what he'd learned. When the signal hit, they bolted back home, and by the final round, Tuda had lost. Belle just grinned and told him he'd need another 1,000,000 years to beat him. Even though Tuda was right there, so close it hurt. Belle spotted Altera running too, gasping for air, and he rushed over to ask if she was all right, only for Altera to snap back that next time they'd better not leave her behind. Suddenly, a goat pushed right up to them and shoved its muzzle straight into the elf's face. Altera panicked, shot back, and let out a scream. She stared at the goat and asked what it was doing there, and Belle snapped his arm shut to say he'd almost totally forgotten. Shearing day was today. Right then, Tawala came trotting up and greeted the boys. The girl snapped that his house had way too many women for him to rely on. Haircuts were women's work back in their village, so when Altera spun toward the seamstress, pure shock hit her face. She thrust a special pair of scissors into her hands on the spot and urged her to try them, only for the girl to wave them away fast, panicking that she had zero idea how to use them. Then Tuola pointed at the other adventurers and told Altera that her friends had adapted fast and were doing great, while the girls waved at her, smiling and saying hello. Altera even shrugged off the moment, saying she hadn't noticed the girls at all because they slid into the job so naturally, and when she leaned in, she added that Tokola's hands were pure skill. Belle spun around and told her he had to go, right now. Altera snapped, "Where are you heading?" And Belle smirked, proud as ever, saying men had other jobs to handle. The girls stared at him, stunned, speechless. Belle slid aside and started replaying it all in his head, realizing just how brutal it was for a guy to sit through girl talk, and that if he kept getting lazy for too long, he'd fall behind for good. When he looked back at everything he'd done over the last couple of weeks, he realized he'd been pushing himself way too hard lately. After getting reincarnated, he swore he'd finally live a peaceful life as just some ordinary villager. But even with all of that, it crushed his old life. Nothing could beat waking up to this world instead of being trapped in that gray, stuffy city from before. Because Belle truly believed everything here was better. Suddenly, the guy clocked an incredible, weird creature lurking nearby, doing its best to stay quiet and not draw a crowd. And then, boom, a weird half-beast showed up, stitched together from both beast and human, while its stomach rumbled loud and clear like it couldn't wait another second to devour something. Compassion blazing in his chest, Belle figured he could spare a meal for that hungry creature, and dug into his supplies to try feeding it. With the cookie held out like it mattered, he watched as the animal sniffed the treat, suspicious and cautious at first, then suddenly took it with a grateful little shift and gobbled it up like it was pure treasure. The moment the little creature snatched the cookie, the boy grinned and promised something bigger. He could whip up a real meal fast. Then he leaned in and asked, thoughtful and serious, if the animal even ate meat. Belle shot out his hand, and with a flick of magic he yanked a tiny pot out of thin air, then grinned like, "That's it. Everything's ready to cook up something delicious." The tiny creature demolished a whole steaming pot of hot, meaty goodness. Then, belly full and grin wide, he flopped onto his back on the ground and let out a satisfied little snort. Belle realized he couldn't just leave the kid here to sleep, so he had to make a snap decision right then. The moment that guy reached out for the half-beast, a shadow slipped in behind him and demanded he not lay a finger on the creature. His voice kept pressing, demanding to know what he planned to do with his daughter. Belle told him to stop worrying, and the girl zonked out right after Belle fed her. Meanwhile, the boy couldn't help but wonder who he really was. So the man grabbed the child and claimed he was the chief of the Sarada tribe, Herbal, then said the girl's name was Eliza. Belle said that man was so panicked about the kid, he somehow left her all alone. And then, Belle admitted, the girl looked downright frail and starving. It all looked like fate had a plan behind it. Belle ordered the man to track down Avala Trading Company right nearby the village and told him to make it clear he was sent by Belle. The guy grinned, certain he'd actually hear the tale of this beast. Hairball demanded, "Why's that boy helping us, and why does he do it without asking for anything back?" Belle shot back, reaching out. "When times get tough, we all need to lean on each other." Herbal shot the guy a heartfelt thank you, like she truly meant it. He strode back into the forest, cradling his child tight in his arms. Out of nowhere, Tuda burst in, sprinting toward his brother and shouting, and Belle shot back, "Did we finish the haircut?" Tuta looked up and warned, "It'll get dark soon," then urged them to head back home. Belle grinned and nodded right away, promising they'd team up and maybe even turn it into a race between them. The boy said it with zero doubt. This time, he wasn't going to lose. After a while, Chappelle and Belle ditched the noise and headed off together to a new place. On their way, they ran into Aval and his wife out in the neighborhood, strolling like they had nowhere else to be. Then the girl grinned and said Chappelle was crazy happy today. The girl swore it was true, then blurted that they'd head out to get plero fruits. Serenella had no clue what they were, but Belle jumped in and said it was a sour fruit and that it was perfect for making jam. Then the girl leaned in and said she wanted to make jam too, asking where the fruit grows, and the thrilled Chappelle blurted, "It only grows on a desert island!" The girl asked how they'd reach the island, and she instantly pictured flying magic, but Belle shot that down, saying he couldn't fly and haul Chappelle too, so they'd need a different plan. A massive dragon towered over everything, and even with those tiny front paws, it went by the name Rukuku. He slammed down nearby, and Avala's wife started hiccuping from pure terror. She couldn't even wrap her head around it being a dragon. Belle swore that normally the guy asks for help, but every time they hit that island, they just fly right on him. Chappelle snapped that they should hurry, then the group bolted ahead, grinning as they charged straight at the dragon. Belle waved at the boys and promised they'd catch up with them later. Soon they were nearly there, right on the brink of reaching their target spot on their dragon. They stormed onto an island, cut off by water in every direction, and dead center loomed a massive mountain, hundreds of meters tall. The moment their feet hit the ground, Chappelle burst into cheers, finally relieved they'd made it, while Belle warned her to keep her guard up, no dropping it until they'd uncovered every danger lurking here. Chappelle tore off into the forest at once, while Belle trailed behind with a heavy sigh. He loved seeing her grow into such an energetic girl, but why did her childish habits still cling so stubbornly? They scaled a bit higher, and Chappelle suddenly halted, snapping her finger toward the shore and demanding to know what the heck that thing was standing there. Belle snapped his gaze away, and that's when it hit him. It was a submarine. The guy kept scanning around until, not long after, they stumbled on a tiny campsite. Then Belle spotted a sofa, grabbed a can, and froze when he saw what was inside. Stuff that had absolutely no business being in this world. Suddenly, someone yelled for Belle and the girl to freeze, and when Belle spun around, she saw a naked man gripping a gun, demanding to know who the hell had landed on his island. The boy clapped his sister's hands over her eyes and whispered that he wanted the exact same answer the man was chasing. He leaned in and told the stranger to wear something first, before they even started talking. Not long after, they were huddled by the fire, and the man was finally begging for forgiveness for how rude he'd been earlier. Bandu Takaru introduced himself, 16 years old, Japanese, and somehow from Earth, thinking nobody would ever understand him. Belle bragged that he knew it all. Then the other guy spilled the truth. He too had been reincarnated, and in this life, he's Belle, but he's stuck playing the role of a lowly peasant. After that, the kid burst out shouting with pure joy, because he finally clocked it. Belle was from Earth too. Then Belle told him to drop the formal, respectful talk, since, in this place, they were the same age. Takaru tried to tell them this was the first time he'd ever talked to someone in this whole world, and Belle practically stared in disbelief. How did this guy even survive here? Until he brought up the supplies in the submarine, and right then Chappelle snapped and said he wanted to ride the thing. Belle leaned in and asked permission to step inside his ship and take a look around, and Takeru waved it off, saying it was absolutely no problem. She sprinted straight for the ship and Belle barked, "Don't smash anything, and don't you dare use magic in there." Hearing that, Takeru snapped into realization. He should have grilled Mogu for more than just one wish. And Belle guessed he'd asked for a submarine in this world. But hey, there were still 2 wishes sitting there, waiting to be used. The other 2 he activated on autopilot, and they instantly repaired his ship's systems and snapped everything inside into place. But here's the cruel twist. No matter how much fuel and electricity were inside, that guy still couldn't use the auto-repair function. Even his body refused to use magic again, because it was wired the same way as it had been in his past life. Belle said it felt wildly wrong. If that guy really got it from God, then he'd have to be able to use the functions. Right then, Takeru stared past the guy's shoulder, and the second Belle spun around, he saw the submarine floating in the air. Right above him, his sister stood, and the moment the guy saw her, he yelled at her to stop using magic, fast. Turns out there was a sign inside screaming to "Put magic in," and when Chappelle did, the submarine shot straight up like it had been waiting all along. That blew everyone's mind. Takuru even clocked that the auto-repair kicked in perfectly. Then Bed swore she's just using magic to move, and Takuru had to admit, he's got none of that power at all. Takuro dropped to the ground and snapped that the truth was brutally cruel, because in this situation, it all felt pointless. Since he can't use magic, he can't even claim the 3 wishes. He even admitted he should have seen it coming, that once you realize this world runs on magic, everything changes, and if he'd actually thought it through, he'd have wished for totally different things and been a lot smarter. Belle snapped that it was way too soon to give up, because the guy was lucky enough to bump into them, and then he fired off the next move. It was time to escape this desert island together. The young man snapped his eyes onto the hero, like the whole world just locked in. Belle also told him this world is way bigger than the boy could ever picture. Then he leaned in, kicked Takeru in the spirit, and urged him not to quit too soon, just to keep following them. Chappelle closed the distance and stepped right up to them. She grinned and told him he could sleep over, because that was her way of thanking him for letting her mess around inside his submarine. The guy's grin cracked across his face. They dashed up to the house, and the moment Belle and Chappelle slipped inside, their mother and younger brother zeroed in on the door and then spotted a visitor. Belle immediately snapped, "This is Takeru!" Takeru glanced around and suddenly spotted even more people ahead than he expected. Then a warm comfort hit him, and his mom immediately noticed the exhaustion on his face. She ran him a bath and told him to go first. Suddenly, the door blasted open, and Sarah Nilla barreled inside. The girl whipped around to Belle and demanded he come with her to the store because she and Aval were in deep trouble. The street throbbed with crowds, loud and electric, like everyone was hungry for something. Sarah Nilla sprinted with Belle to the house and yelled that she'd brought a boy, and Abel shot his hand up like, "Hurry, someone's waiting for me there!" The boy spotted every face in the crowd, half-beast people from his world, and the man bowed to Belle, admitting they'd decided to trust in the young man's kindness, coming to this place for help. Belle promised they'd do anything, but before he could move, he demanded to know how a whole nation slid into that kind of hopelessness. Then the man launched into his tale. Just days ago, they got ambushed by a pack of orcs, got torn apart, and everyone bolted in different directions. In the end, Urbio finally tore through the distance and got reunited with his daughter again, right by that village. Urbil told them they could finally get back together, but no matter what, there was no place left for them to call home. He promised they could pay it back down the road, because they had nobody else to turn to. Belle whipped around to ask his friend what Abel thought of all this, and the man said they could offer these people a chance to live in an underground city. Then Aval told Belle to slow down, because he suddenly remembered this. Those dungeon folks hadn't even started building yet. Yeah, the place was huge, but right now there wasn't even a real setup or infrastructure. He also said they'd need a ton of resources to build a house for all these creatures from the ground up. And just like that, everything snowballs into pure chaos, 10 times worse than before. Takaru burst out from behind a wall and told Herbal he'd brought food for him and his crew. Then the kid basically waved them in and said, "Dig in, take your fill." Bell shot the guy an apology, explaining he was only a guest, but he still had to help. Takaris waved it off, saying it was fine since he was just paying that kindness back. Bell figured that with enough lant, they could slip close by, then the guy suddenly snapped to it. The young man stared at him in shock. He instantly remembered the uninhabited island he'd asked Takeru about. Bell told him it was massive, with a towering mountain, a lake, and best of all, nobody living there. Bell pointed at the half-beast, crowned him the head of the tribe, and right away pitched the wild plan to move their whole crew to a deserted island, one with everything they'd need to live. Bell promised there'd be no enemies there, and it finally calmed Urbla until a single thought hit him hard. Could his people actually survive in a place like that? Abel claimed the beast was ready to feast, but the boy bristled at the cruelty of dumping them alone in a land he didn't even recognize, while Bell insisted it'd all be okay because he truly believed. The boy turned to leave, then blurted, "Wait, I'll go with you and teach you real survival skills like building, hunting, and the basics of trading." And Bell nodded like, "Yeah, that's smart," before turning to everyone and demanding their opinion. Bell grinned wide and went straight to the tribe's leader, asking if the tribe wanted to claim the empty island, where Bell's people would rule for a while. The moon blazed overhead, bathing everyone in dazzling silver light. The very next day, Erbil started coaxing his little daughter Eliza awake. He grabbed a basket of fresh fruit for breakfast, then looked you dead in the eye and said, "Wait, I've got something really important to announce." Bell stood on a little rise and beamed at everyone who showed up, calling out a bright good morning. Then the guy rushed in, introduced himself, and proclaimed he was just a peasant living in this village, and his name was Bell. Bell kept talking. Today he'd rounded up every last half-animal and was about to drop a bombshell. An important announcement called the Desert Island Reclamation Project. The crowd started whispering, and Sarah Nilla, right beside her husband, pounced on Avil and demanded to know what Bell meant. Avil didn't bother pretending he didn't understand. He just had a nasty feeling he was looking at a swindler. Someone shot up their hand, and the girl demanded to know if the island was truly empty, then added she was sure plenty of animals there wouldn't be thrilled to let this project happen. Bell flicked his thumb like he meant it and said the girl was right. Then, with the same hand he'd lifted earlier, he pointed straight at the boy, Takaru, and told everyone they could grill him for every last detail about the island. Bell strode up to the boy and promised him he'd be okay, but the kid snapped that Takira had to tell only what it was like to survive the island, where he and Chappelle found him, and then the guy admitted it was way more unexpected than he ever guessed. When Takara stepped out into the crowd of animals, the muttering hit him like a slap. He couldn't stop worrying, and soon the whispers turned into voices speaking to him one by one. The tribe's leader fired the first question. Abril wanted to know what Takura's life on the island was really like, whether he'd felt any danger, and what kind of vicious creatures were lurking out there. The guy kept rubbing his hands, whispering that he'd never once met another soul on the island, and that where he lived, there wasn't a single hint of danger because the island was totally, completely empty. He told them it was nothing but a mountain, a lake, a forest, and the sea, so they'd have to build shelter fast, and Tucker swore the island would feed them with plenty of fish and edible plants. Tucker later admitted the island felt almost nice once he finally settled in. Then his voice cracked, and a tiny tear slipped out, because he'd been there for so long that time already felt like it flew by. Erbil caught every word from the guy, then turned and fired up the rest of the group, saying they'd heard him perfectly, so the island would stay safe and the invaders wouldn't make it. Everyone started eyeing one another, whispering, "We've never lived by the sea a day in our lives." Bell figured that after living on land for so long, creatures like them would find that move brutally hard, or flat out impossible. The animals kept grumbling, and then Erbil snapped his voice up and declared it was the right move. He said, "We're the ones they chased out of our hometown, and now we finally get this shot to live in peace." Erbil admitted they'd never truly lived on an island, until Bell stepped in with a way for them to stay together, safe from the dangers that used to haunt them. Then he stared everyone down with sharp, unwavering intensity and declared, "This is exactly why I think this is our perfect shot." Erbil barked out another command, shouting for everyone to trust him and fall in line, and once again, his words lit a fire in the crowd. Soon they started to say they finally understood their leader, and they threw their full support behind staying together at all costs. Then the whole tribe erupted with hope, thrilled that they were about to rise back to greatness. Bell craned his neck and told the chief it was awesome, and Herbal laughed that he hadn't heard a speech like that in ages. Some animals started creeping closer to Bell, closing in one step at a time. They asked if they could tour that island first, because they wanted eyes on it before anything else, and Bell promised them Tucker would be more than happy to help. Bell clocked the guy's reaction and grinned, saying, "This is gonna be awesome." Takira's about to train and master controlling a submarine. Abel propped Takaru up and begged Bell to lay off the bullying, and Bell snapped back that he wasn't being rude at all. He was helping the guy. Abel shut his shop for the day because he had something huge to talk over with the tribe's leader. The boy strode up to him and asked, straight up, if he could sell him some wool from the Sarada tribe. Bell barked and jabbed his finger at AWOL, yelling that he was way too smart for his own good since the kid wanted the wool too. AWOL shot back, "I'm still first!" And the chief pressed them. Could they really sell the fur? I told you he'd crunch the numbers. And one single roll of wool from that tribe could snag around 5 silver coins, which was an absolute steal on the market. Erbil stared at his hand and declared the price was a steal, and Aval fired back that their wool was finer than a long-haired goat's fur, so artisans would snatch it up in a heartbeat. Then Abel grinned and promised he could even hand over half the proceeds for this, so the tribe's leader nodded, but only if one condition was met. The man told Abel to hand over part of the money that was owed to him to Bowl, and then Herbal snapped around to the boy and urged him to take it as a thank you for all his hard work and care. Bell let out a chuckle and told Abel, "I've heard it all firsthand." And he made it clear he was praying that Mr. Genius Merchant was about to drop something truly legendary. After Erbil promised they'd start by shaving every single inhabitant, the Bila family grabbed every wool scissor they owned and went straight to work, shearing the whole tribe. Bell finally dropped back into his seat, convinced everyone was carrying on just fine without him. Then the calm around him felt almost loud, until, right on cue, footsteps crept in nearby. A tiny old man, straight up gnome energy with a silly little cap, woke from his nap, apologized to the boy for bothering him, then immediately asked for a job. Bell's eyes went wide when he spotted a gnome standing there, so he blurted out where the little guy came from and how long he'd been living there. The gnome lifted his hands and declared he'd been with the Sarada tribe since the very beginning. Bell started figuring out what job he could hand this dwarf. Then his mind raced to the island development project until a different memory snapped into place. Bell remembered the dwarves were legendary blacksmiths, but one dwarf instantly shut him down, snapping that he had no idea how to forge at all. When Bell asked what the little dwarf could do, the old man puffed up with pride and claimed he was a leather craftsman. And Bell lit up even more once she realized he could actually work with that kind of material. And the gnome bragged that every single thing he wore was made by his own hands. The old man cut in and said it was the only move he had left, so he had to step in and help with whatever he could. Bell tapped the man on the shoulder and told him, "Don't stress," then chimed in that tons of people would have snapped up a craftsman like him. Too bad, though, because there wasn't a single leather workshop anywhere nearby. But Bell also spilled that he'd stocked a ridiculous pile of raw leather in his warehouse, kept there on purpose. That's why the guy comes to him and offers him a spot as his personal master. Bell promised he'd pay the master for the work, and even if he had to, he'd make sure the young man built him and his family a house right nearby. But the old man couldn't help doubting that this kind of outcome was ever really normal. Bell slammed his indecision aside and decided he'd take charge himself. He said it with total confidence. He wanted a master like that. No questions asked. The old man nodded and they clapped hands, and the dwarf practically beamed as he swore it was brilliant, then offered to gladly become Bell's personal master for leather and all the leather goods. Everyone stared, mouths open, as the moment unfolded right in front of them. Then Takaru shot back into the scene. Bell snapped right into the moment and greeted the guy on the spot. Bell fired off questions right away, and what he heard about moving people in a submarine made the whole thing sound painfully nerve-wracking. But as Bell said, this world wasn't just big, It was absolutely enormous. Bell fired off a question to Tucker. What's his next move? Tucker grinned and said he was headed out on a voyage across the open sea. And he said he can't help it. He's pulled toward every wonder this world hides, craving the chance to see it with his own eyes, chase the unknown corners, and drink in the atmosphere that makes it unique. Bell sprang to his feet and snapped to Tucker that this plan might not be as simple as it sounds, because once you hit the sea, travel turns into one brutal challenge after another. Bell leaned in and laid out the whole sea adventure for him. Who was in the crew, how the pirates operated, what it cost, and every bit of gear they hauled aboard. Bell stopped mid-breath and told Tucker, "Before you charge into plans this huge, you've got to learn what common sense actually looks like." Fell swore he'd never, under any circumstance, let some clueless fool who didn't get the full weight of the moment take the captain's seat. Bell declared he'd head into town the very next day to handle urgent business, then urged Takaru to come with him, because seeing the world and snagging real experience starts right there. Bell flashed Takaru a heartfelt smile and told him to team up for tomorrow's adventure so they could hang out, bond harder, and sharpen their friendship. Bell's calm, confident words left the guy no choice. He burst out laughing. His comrade's light, effortless tone kept cracking jokes in the air, and that unshakable confidence was so strong and so proven that it made it feel like every problem would crumble easily, with hardly any effort at all. The dwarf who'd taken a job as Bell's leather craftsman bolted out of the enclosure and announced, breathless, that his work was done. "Takaru's got these clothes, and you can tell he's freaking out. He's scared the gift is way too expensive." Bell told him not to sweat it. Turns out they were grabbing whatever they could find lying around. Everything around them screamed rich. All because Bella had brought in a top-tier craftsman with real skill. Mother stepped out and beamed, saying she was thrilled the boys had forged such a strong friendship. But she also snapped that they picked a terrible time and place, since they were basically almost in town. The kids shot them a question. "Will you buy us souvenirs?" Everyone leaned forward, with bright smiles on their faces. The kids cheered them on and wished them luck as they took off. As they blasted off on that giant dragon, Altera stayed off in the distance, watching from afar. The other girls snickered and teased her about feeling lonely after Belle left her behind. But Altera snapped right away and said, "No, not at all." She started to gush that she was just relieved he'd finally found a friend his own age, because Belle always felt like he couldn't fully open his heart to anyone. Right when they rolled up, they slowed at the giant gate. Belle marched up, shouted his name and why he was there, then grabbed the supplies they needed so they could slip through the Beliari city checkpoint. The little man stared at the list of goods Belle was about to buy, let out a hard breath, and muttered that this year there was yet another mega wholesaler lurking in the mix. Takaru had no clue what was going on, and the controllers caught it right away, so he burst into an explanation immediately. Every year, Belle goes wild, smashing shops open to empty, every single store. The guy's eyes went wide. He couldn't believe what he just saw. Then the gates creaked open, like something was finally ready to unleash. Belle insisted they hit the market first. Takeru shot his hand up and admitted he wasn't strong enough to haul all those things. Belle snapped his head toward Tucker, beamed that reassuring smile, and in a calm voice promised he'd shove every single one of their hard-won items straight into his magical barrier, so Tucker could stop worrying about a thing. Takeru stared at him like he couldn't understand a single word. What magical barrier was Belle even talking about? So Belle grinned, decided to show him, and told him it was one of the abilities he'd gained after reincarnating. Belle yanked Takaru's hand and blurted, "We're running out of time. Stick with me. We've got to hit every store we planned in this area and grab everything we need before it's too late." Before they knew it, they were swept into the city's chaos, spending most of the day strolling through loud, crowded streets with big smiles, soaking up the vibe and gaping at the window displays in shop after shop. They stared at the store displays, eyes locked on every product, scanning the whole lineup like they were hunting for something big. Before long, it hit them. Belle had pre-ordered like a genius at a bunch of the stores they visited, so everything moved at lightning speed, and they didn't have to sit around wasting time waiting. With their bags full and their orders stacked high, they hit the streets again, fueled up and pushing forward through the city like nothing could slow them down. They pushed on toward the next stop in their planned route, and then they got hit with a shock they didn't see coming. A massive church clawed up from the horizon, and Bell swore that's where they'd hunt for the right people to crew their submarine. Takaru blinked in real shock at Bell's words, wondering if you'd even be allowed to roam freely somewhere like a church. With a small, smug smile, Bell just said, "I'm always in touch with one of the local sisters." Soon, their sister swung the door open, welcomed everyone, and right away singled out Bell. Then Bell thanked the director and asked how things were going back at the orphanage. The girl smiled and said everything was fine, thanks to the guy's donations. Bell spun around and told him, "I run this place, and yeah, I even crafted a bunch of tools for the building myself." Takeru's jaw dropped in pure disbelief. The moment they stepped inside, someone pushed a snack their way. Miso soup came steaming in bowls, and little buns landed beside it. Then, Takaru froze in shock when he recognized the dish. Bell grinned and admitted it wasn't exactly mimo. It was gozen soup, brewed without miso, yet somehow it still tasted just like it. Takaru nodded hard, saying that flavor hit like pure nostalgia. Takuru shot up from his seat as soon as he was done. He burst into a room and found two boys waiting inside. They shot him nasty looks for a second, but Takaru just wanted to shout, "We cooked up the most delicious food!" The principal rushed up, apologized for the girl's rudeness, and the boys expected a scolding, but Belle just grinned and said it was no big deal, like, she is who she is, and that was that. Meanwhile, Takeru slid in close and got down to business with the guys. He told them he'd let the boys become cooks on his ship, and he made it clear they wouldn't be sailing anytime soon, but that offer still stood. She spun around and told him, "If you're talking about your ship, you're probably its captain." Then she eyed him like he couldn't be trusted and tossed a bun right at his face. He admitted he's a total newbie right now and that he's got tons to learn in this game, then promised he'll never let down the guys who team up with his crew. Then he explained that this was exactly why Takaru would be able to blow their minds with things they'd never even dream of seeing inside that orphanage. That kid instantly lit up, bursting into talk about how he had to see all the incredible things out there, then turned around and asked, could someone like him really witness all of it? Takara grinned and said, "Yeah, I can," then immediately pitched, "Let's do it together." Next thing you know, the guys were jumping up and down, yelling that they were in, ready to see every inch of this whole world. Bell spun around and said, "Yeah, that's exactly how it went down." He asked if the principal was cool with it, but his sister shrugged. Those kids had already voted to go, so she didn't think twice. As they headed out, Takaru leaned back and waved at the kids one more time, like he was stamping the moment into their day. He braced himself for a nightmare of learning, because these guys were basically dragging everyone out the door the second they could. After that, Bell snapped that if that was the deal, they had to head straight for the city's capital. He said plain and clear that no one strong enough lived nearby to crush the pirates and guard the kids at the same time, so they might as well pick from whoever's right there, on the spot. Bell flashed a smile and pressed Takaru for his final decision, and without a second's hesitation, Takaru shot back that, of course, he was ready to move on. Bell praised the captain's killer attitude, and Takaru shot back that it was Bell who made it happen. By late evening, the whole place had gone quiet. Everyone was already out cold, asleep. A sharp knock rattled Bell's room, late as it was. He kept studying, flipping through the pages, then froze, wondering who would dare interrupt him. He shut the book, leaned in, and called out that his door was already left open. Altera slipped into the room in her nightclothes and asked, right at the door, if they could talk alone for a minute. The girl leaned in and told everyone she'd heard the bombshell. Bell and Takaru were headed straight for the royal capital. Bell shot back that they'd have to hit a bunch of places to track down a real crew for the ship. Then the kid added that he could clear out his warehouse as temporary housing, and he even invited Altera to tag along with them. Before the guy could even finish, Altera cut him off and snapped that she couldn't do it. Then the girl shrugged, saying she was an adventurer and a mission was coming up fast. The girl admitted she never thought she'd still be here when Bell came back, so she grabbed the moment and thanked him right then for every word he'd given her. The girl burst with happiness when Belle praised her dark hair as wonderful, something nobody had ever dared to say to her before. She also thanked the universe, grateful she can finally face the future with pride. And when Belle said, "It's just wonderful," you could feel the joy hit like a wave. Altera shot her hand up and declared that if Belle had ever picked up adventurer life too, everything might have turned out completely different. Belle told her Altera could come back the moment loneliness hit, and when the words landed, the girl stared at him, stunned he'd say it right then. Belle swore he'd always stay right here, no matter what. Altera told everyone that Belle is a genuinely great guy. Yeah, he's younger than her, but she just wants to thank him again. The next day hit, and the boys were already tearing out onto the streets. Belle promised they'd reach the capital by Takaru's submarine, while the other guy swore the dragon was quicker, and Belle shot back that the sea route was way more convenient. Belle told him they'd start by slipping into the submarine and heading to a tiny island near the royal capital, then finish the trip on his boat. Yet the guy just couldn't wrap his head around why they were skipping the port. Belle bowed his head and admitted, voice heavy, that the mafia was the real boss of the port. Takaru couldn't believe the capital's public order had fallen this far. Turns out, that gnome had been tailing them the whole time. Then he finally sprinted up, breathless, grabbed his master's attention, and shouted that he'd caught up with the boys at last. A younger gnome stood right beside him, and the boy blurted out instantly, "Meeting Belle is an honor for me." His father sat him down and said, "You're chasing your dream. You want to become a master's apprentice." When the boys slipped out, their father demanded to take his son to the capital. Belle wasn't against it at all. He nodded and agreed, and the gnome boy stepped up to introduce himself. "My name's Denko." Denko's father barked at him to mind his manners on Master Belle's trip and not stir up trouble. Denko rubbed the back of his head and promised he'd obey the master. Soon they were tearing across the water on a boat, and Denko couldn't believe it. No way did he think that guy could have even built something like this. And yeah, Belle totally blew him away. Belle straight up admitted it made him laugh, then leaned in and said, "As long as there's black sand, I'm telling you, the master will bet Denko can churn out one, because even dwarves can use magic, you know." Denko beamed and promised he'd try to make one when they got back home, while Takaru hesitated, worried that rare resources were a terrible idea to hand to newbie. Belle blurted, "Eyes up! Look ahead!" because they were right on the edge of getting there. Right ahead sprawled the royal capital of Slenvik, a seaside city with a 300-year past. And Belle grinned as he told them it hit totally different, nothing like the cities back on the mainland. Then the guy told them to clean out the warehouse first. Only after that could they sleep there. And Denko shot his hand up, saying they could totally trust him with the job so they'd track the team down faster. Belle leaned in, asking if the kid was really sure, only for it to hit that Denko wasn't at all. Denko promised that when the boys came back, everything would be gleaming like new, and Belle nodded, then slipped the gnome the key. Denko flashed the guys a wave, and Belle grabbed Takaru and hauled him off, saying they were heading for the port. Meanwhile, the guy nearly freaked out. He figured it out fast because the mafia was right there, so Belle shot in and instantly soothed the guy down, knowing it wasn't worth playing the coward when he was hunting for a team. Takeru asked, "Are we really going to find experts here?" Belle hesitated, said he wasn't sure, and that's when Takeru decided to hunt down a friend who actually lived in the capital. Belle was telling Takaru about Barvant, the president of the Basawuder Company, and the second Takaru heard Belle knew him, curiosity exploded. Belle warned them to stay sharp because the crowd was huge. Then, moments later, a voice snapped from right behind him. It was his old acquaintance who spotted the boy the moment he laid eyes on him. He told everyone it felt like a gift from fate because he never imagined they'd ever cross paths here in the royal capital. The man leaned in and thanked the boy for fixing their ship, and then Belle shot Laguerre a question. "Is our boss here now?" The guy said Barvand is slammed with work, but they can still leave him a message. Then Belle shrugged and said, "Nah, you don't need to do that." He leaned in and grilled Laguerre, asking if he knew any spots where his friend could finally land a real team. When Laguerre caught wind of it, a grin spread across his face, and he told the boys they could hire adventurer merchants. He even said that they swap cargo while they're out at sea, that it could be a solid career choice. Then Takuru just froze and admitted he had no clue that kind of job existed. Bell blurted that they needed to see the group right now, and Legier eagerly stepped in, promising he'd take the boys straight to the group's habitat. Suddenly, Takuru shouted at Bell that something terrible was going down near the head. Bell snapped his head up at once. He spotted a ship blazing in the distance, and crowds started piling around it like the whole world had to stare. They surged closer in seconds. The girl was sobbing her heart out. She dropped to her knees, begging that her father wouldn't make it much longer. And when Bell pressed her on what happened, Legier snapped that pirates were behind it. The girl yelled that they needed a doctor. Then the man nearby cut in, saying the doctors around here only treated nobles and the rich, so he had zero way to help her. Bell closed the distance to the girl. Bell popped up right beside him and told the man, "Don't worry, I've got you. I can help." With tears blazing in her eyes, she stared at him. Then the boy blurted out that he had real medical skills. Staring at his arm, Bell snapped that there was no saving it, so they were going to cut it off. Suddenly, the girl, shaking with panic and despair, lunged at the boy, her voice cracking as she screamed that if he went through with his plan, her father would never swim again for the rest of his life. The girl said her father was an unstoppable adventurer, and keeping him from swimming would crush him in a way he could never recover from. Bell stayed calm and told her, in plain words, that he understood just how brutal that kind of struggle was for her. Even with all that sympathy, Bell flat out said this: right now, in this moment, nothing matters more than human life. As consciousness slowly crawled back into him, the man squeezed out a heartfelt apology, his voice cracking as he begged his daughter's forgiveness. When she heard her father's familiar voice, she blurted out in pure joy. Hope flooded her, and relief hit hard as she realized he was alive and finally starting to snap back to himself. With his last bursts of strength, the man snapped that if this was the only way out, he'd sign on to any plan, because if he died, nothing in this world would mean a thing. The man then blurted out another apology for the interruption, but he insisted the boy take a look at the rest of the crew too, because more of them might have been hurt. Bell barked orders, urging Ligier to grab any clean clothes he could find, then shouted for Takuru. Then the guy spun toward Tucker, grinned with a knife clenched in his hand, and promised he'd help him out right here. Soon, through their combined power, everyone got rescued. Bell folded his arms and thanked Ligier for what he'd done, and Ligier just grinned and waved it off. No need, it was an emergency. Then Bell told Ligier to send Barvo his regards. The man started to walk off, then glanced back after a few steps and gave a quick, satisfied nod. Takeru crouched around the corner of the house, trembling like he'd seen a ghost, and when Bell leaned in and told him they had to go back, Takeru slowly rose, snapping back to his senses. After that, they strolled down the pier and Bell warned, "Sailing the seas is always a gamble, dangers lurking around every wave." Takuru was totally ready for this, because the guy finally admitted it right there, today. Bell burst out laughing and said the boys looked like they'd completely lost interest in swimming. Takare shot back that he should have been scared, sure, but he wasn't. All it meant for the boy was this: he had to grind his brain hard, figure out how to level himself up fast, or else his crew would end up paying the price. And yeah, he's the captain of the whole crew, so that puts everything in his hands. Bell grinned at the news he'd just heard, and the moment the boy fell into step with Takeru, he tapped his back, smiling, and urged him to give it everything he had. After a little while, the kids leaned in and told Bell they were heading to church, and the girl insisted they'd promised to grab breakfast with her sister and the rest of the children. Bell plants his hands on his hips, nods along with the kids, and promises, "I'll join you later," then admits he still has to hash out the reconstruction plan with his sister, so the kids beam and the young man waves them on. Then Kayaji strides up to Bell and says his name like he's been waiting. He asks straight up if Bell has spotted the captain anywhere, because he still can't find him since this morning, and Bell fires back, wondering if Kayaji really means Takuru. The protagonist says he hasn't laid eyes on the pixies since this morning, and the elf nods hard, admitting the same. He hasn't seen them either. Then Bell tells everyone it's all good, and just like that he spots Takuru, the elf who thanks him. After a while, the young man storms outside and heads straight to where Takaru is. On a park bench, the boy was kneeling and playing with tiny pixies when Bell stomped up and told him, "This is where Takeru's hiding." The boy shot up in shock because Bell actually found him, and then he greeted Bell with a warm, "Good morning." One of the pixies barrels up to Bell and tells him with a grin that they're right now teaching Takaru all about them. Pixie leans in and tells Belle she can heal with magic, promising safer journeys ahead, and Belle exhales, because hearing that reassures him. Takeru flashes a grin and tells them he begged the pixie for one more favor. Now, his mind's racing as he plans to sketch a map for the road ahead. He points straight at the pixies and tells them they'll be the fastest scouts to map the area around them, and Belle grins at how smart that is. Then she calls Takaru by name. Then two more pixies burst back to Tucker. Two girls zip through the air, shout his name, and tell him they're back, while another pixie chimes in that they'd remembered the royal capital from when Tucker was younger and decided to ask. Takaru bows to the pixies and asks if they'll sketch what they remember onto the paper, and the little ones nod, grab a pen, and start drawing out a map. Belle stares at all of this and thinks, so Takaru is getting more confident as captain, huh? Right then, the pixies huddle over the paper, sketching a staircase and a road that runs straight to the sea. Belle remembers their first meeting with Takaru. He had no clue the kid would turn out like this, because that moment totally blindsided him. Right then, the pixie's piercing scream snaps his thoughts in half, yelling that this drawing is wrong. They bickered non-stop over a corner storefront. One insisted it was a department store, and another pixie swore it was a bakery, because the moment she swooped by, the smell of fresh bread hit her mid-flight. The evil pixies leaned toward Tucker and demanded he pick who he thought was right, and the poor kid's whole body drenched in sweat as he blurted he didn't know. He hadn't even seen the area. Belle flashed a smirk and told Takeru he didn't seem to think the future looked a little bleak, and Takeru nodded right along, then snapped at the pixies to stop fighting. Suddenly, another pixie swooped in from the distance, screaming Takaru's name as it blasted through the sky at full speed and warned them they were in serious trouble. The kid rammed straight into the young man's forehead like a wrecking ball. Belle demanded why everyone was losing their minds, and at that exact moment, Takaru clutched his own forehead like the panic was crushing him. The tiny pixie spun toward Belle and whispered that the church was in serious trouble. Takuru wiped the sweat from his forehead and demanded answers, asking what in the world it meant that the church was in deep trouble. The girl said the whole crowd had packed in front of the church, and every single one of them was seething with rage. Belle stared at them, his mind racing through the rebellion that wouldn't die, and hunting for the one thing that sparked it. Belle cut in hard, saying there was no time to talk church right now. He was terrified for the kids. Takaru sprang up instantly and promised he'd call Kayaji and the others at once. A blood-curdling scream ripped through the streets, and people demanded food, then demanded answers. Why was everyone so quiet when they should have been rushing to feed them? Right then, they were out there shaking leaflets like something big was coming. The church girls rushed in to tell those rebels to calm down, but they didn't listen. So the girls snapped at the director that they couldn't hold it in anymore. Suddenly, Belle, Takaru, and the others burst in from behind the church minister. The young man barked for everyone else to rush into the church, now. Then he slammed up a massive wall around the church. People pounded on the wall, baffled by what they were seeing, and then they stared at the young man like he was behind it. Belle shut the door, told everyone, "It's fine now," and the church minister grabbed his thanks, because Belle really had saved them. Then the young man slipped into the room and demanded what was happening, and the church lady just blinked and admitted she wasn't totally sure. She only knew all these people had suddenly shown up here. Right in the middle of it, the elf Kaachi barged in and said they shouldn't be talking about those people. He shoves a leaflet into your hands and insists they're only here because of the words printed on it. Belle stares at the leaflet and blurts out, "What is this?" Kachi scans the words and reads it out loud. They can show up at the church and grab free food, exactly what the flyer promised. He's absolutely convinced this rumor was planted by someone who knew exactly what Belle was doing for them. The boy let out a heavy sigh and swore it was some wild, elaborate prank, like someone was punishing him. Kayaji shook his head and said it had to be the Mafia's doing, because only they could pull something like that. Bell tightens his grip on the leaflet and mutters that it's probably the truth. When you really think about it, this mess is trouble waiting to explode. He rubs his chin, staring at it all, and scrambles to figure out what to do next. Kayachi tells Belle if she dares to ask him then. Tightening his grip on the bow, he growls, "So, how about we wipe out every shadow dweller and find out who really gets the last laugh?" And the hatred and contempt on his face is downright terrifying. Takeru roared Kayachi's name and demanded, "So you'll really pull your bow and shoot everyone?" Kayachi told the captain not to fret. He'd already memorized every face, and even if the crowd scattered them, he was certain his arrow would find them. Takeru yanked at Kayachi's clothes and pleaded for him to calm down, and Belle couldn't shake the feeling that Kayachi was deadly serious. Then a girl off to the side burst into laughter. She plopped on the doorway and burst into wild laughter. Then the girl smirked and bragged that Kachi's blood was scorching hot for some forest-raised elf. So the young man snapped around and demanded to know what she meant. The girl sprang out of the doorway, and the young man shot her a look, claiming he'd already thrown up a barrier around the entire church perimeter where she'd come in. She leaned in, stared hard, and then said the truth. This wasn't a trick at all. It was a full-on barrier. The girl whips around to Kayachi, slaps him with the word elf, and demands to know if he really thinks his plan can fix this, because even if he cuts down the instigators, the rest won't calm down while they're hungry. So the whole problem boils down to one thing. He just has to fill his stomach, and that's the real solution. She whips around to Belle, asking if she nailed it, and the young man lets out a tired sigh, then gives the girl a nod that says, "Yep, you got it." And honestly, she can't decide what to make of this, seeing the assistant haul his master around like that, while Kaji watches Takeru cling to the boy's belt. The elf spun to the captain and blurted out a heartfelt apology, and Takara only nodded, saying he was just relieved the boy had finally gotten his composure back. Then Belle whipped around to the girl and demanded to know exactly who she was. Sunny flashed a smirk and told the boy, "Don't overdo it. I'm not here to fight you." People call her the Eternal Witch. And today she stormed in just to personally invite Belle to a tea party. The young man blurts that, yeah, she can clearly tell he's a little tied up right now. The girl tells him, "Just take it from here. Leave everything to the guy standing back." And she's so sure Takeru will nail it. But Takeru's suddenly terrified and blurts out, "Wait, you really want me to handle all of it?" The girl fires back that she's sure Takeru's got talent too, so he should finally trust himself. Then Belle admits, "I already told you, I won't go with you." The girl grins and tells him the tea party's being put together by her friend, someone everyone around here knows, so she's promising this little gathering will do the young man a lot of good. She fixes Belle with a sharp look, smirking as she says, even now he still refuses to go with her. The boy blurts out whether the girl's friend is tied to the mafia, and she just giggles, saying you can say he's connected and not connected at the same time, because that's exactly how she sees it. Belle thinks that girl might get shipped off, and on top of that, she keeps teasing him non-stop. He's totally hooked. The protagonist lets out a breath, nods, and says he's in. He'll follow the girl to that tea party, or whatever crazy thing it's called. Then he rushes to Takeru, throws out an apology, and admits he'll have to leave this place in the young man's hands, leaving Takeru utterly shocked. Then Belle slides over to Kayachi and Denko to help Tucker hold the fort. Kayachi nods right away, but Denko teases Belle, calling him bro, and tells him to take care of himself. Belle whips around to Takeru and warns him. Once Belle steps out, his barrier won't last. The people outside will claw at it to get in, so Takeru has to stop them. And that hits Takeru like a punch. He's shocked and terrified. Kaji rushes up to him and asks if the boy's okay. Then Takeru lets out a heavy sigh and slams both hands over his face, leaving the elf stunned at the wild move his captain just pulled. Takeru forces himself to breathe, then tells the world, everything's fine, even as his nerves scream otherwise. He calls the church sister and orders her to grab every ingredient she can find, then rushes her to cook for the kids. Ass, app, and she answers, got it. He spun back to Kayaji and Denko and barked, come with me, and they followed. Sunny leans in and tells Belle that his friends are crazy interesting. Then he thanks her with a grin. After that, he asks where the party is, and Sunny just smirks, saying he'll figure it out for himself real soon. After a short while, they finally stumble into the right spot. Then the girl beams, says welcome, and points him to a cafe called Enjoyable Time with Auntie Gurin. The young man asked if this was a shop, and Sunny shot back, yeah. Then let him in on the real twist, that she lived the high life right here, serving drinks as a waitress. The young man scans his surroundings and goes, wow, this place feels straight out of a different world. Then a guy slides up to the girl and asks if the young man is the one from Belle's rumors. She nods and confirms it. The girl introduces the protagonist to her friend Dizelle, an older man who tells her to call him Corey, not Mr. Corey, and the protagonist thanks him and slips right into Mr. Corey. Then he spotted a teapot and a cup drifting in midair, bumping and clinking like they were trying to drink each other, and the young man demanded if they were magical, only for the other to nod and say, yep, like Belle can already see, Auntie Gorin is brewing tea for us right this second. The man claims she ran this place, but he could barely remember seeing her around, and the girl shot back that she hadn't heard that voice in a full 100 years. Then Belle muttered that this auntie was just plain weird. Sunny shot a wink and told him, Gorin is totally off the wall, and even her tea somehow managed to feel just as strange. Then the girl nudges Belle to look, and she blurts out that right now Anne Gurin is busy brewing tea just for him. Then the young man spots the teapot, and bam, memory crashes in, reminding him it's the exact same one he had in his past life. The boy blinks in shock when he recognizes the smell of tea, and the girl tells him Gorin stirs up memories that guide every sip into perfection. Then the teapot reveals its magic, brewing tea endlessly. The man says Auntie Gurin proves her love by tipping tea into the young man's cup, so he better be grateful and drink. Belle, grinning, says he gets the point perfectly, which means he can't refuse. Then he pauses, and even though he can't see her, he insists on saying how grateful he is. So he bows to Santa Gurin, then looks her in the eyes and begs her to take it as his heartfelt thanks. Sunny leans in and asks the boy what it is. The man blurts out, is it a tea cake? And the boy shrugs, it's just something my little sister made, so Sunny can only hope they'll love it. Suddenly, the dessert plate rockets up into the air. Sunny shoots Gurin a warning, yelling that it's a dirty trick and begging her not to gulp down all of it herself. The girl calls out to Belle and begs him to grab a new cake just like that. Belle reassures her, saying he's already got one right there with him. Then the man strides right by them and tells the young guy, finish up and you can step into the next room, to lay bare his urgent problems before everything blew up. After a bit, the young man barges into another room, apologizing for the wait, and the other man snaps back that it's no big deal. He should have been the one apologizing for how Sunny acted when she saw the sweets. Then he points out a bunch of men and demands, do you recognize any of these guys? Belle shakes his head fast. No, never. I've never seen them before. The man said, I get it. Like it clicked the moment he heard it. Then he snapped that those dumb people were doing it on their own, not taking orders. Belle didn't have a clue what any of it even meant. Then the man stared them down and demanded to know if they'd charge their young with care, because they'd better make damn sure nobody in their families laid a hand on that boy again. He bears a stern glare and growls that this is the final warning. Then the men quickly answer, we understand. Mr. Corey declares it's done and tells them they're free to go. So the men bow, then hurry to ask for their leave. Belle snapped his head to Corey and demanded, what just happened? Corey said the kid had barely seen the heads of 4 giant mafia families in the capital, and somehow the man who warned each of them still got noticed. Corey blinks, says, this is why the mafia won't mess with me anymore. And Belle realizes Sunny was right. Corey's famous, and that's exactly what the kid never saw coming. Belle narrowed his eyes and snapped that his grandpa was something else, and the guy just flashed a sweet little smile like, yeah, it's really not a big deal. He said there's always time to talk it out with a grizzled old guy like him, and that a kid like Belle should stick to the usual stuff young guys are supposed to do. The young man flashes a grin, thanks him, and then promises he'll take every word to heart. The man admitted he genuinely valued the boy's blunt honesty, and Belle lit up, saying it felt like a huge honor to be praised like that by Cory. When she gets back, Belle rushes up to Denko and finds a wrecked Takaru barely able to stand. Belle asks what happened, and Takaru admits it. Fatigue, stress, and straight-up fear. Belle can't help but feel for him, because, yeah, that has to be brutal. Kauchi told him, "You've got to see it yourself," because Captain Takaru's presence was so jaw-dropping it hit him right in the feels. Then Takaru straight up told him to stop, since it was way too embarrassing. The folks who showed up this morning said they'd pitch in for the church repairs too, and Belle practically lit up. "That's perfect!" He spun around and told the Tucker he'd knock the crowd flat, and the young guy shot back that everyone was tense because they were hungry. Though the truth was, they were good people through and through. Takaru leaned in and grilled the boy about how his tea party went. Belle mulled it over, then said it was just like the adult world. At least, that's what he thought. Takaru had no clue and blurted out, "What does that even mean?" After a bit, Belle dropped into a chair and blurted out that it was time to lay out the plan to rebuild the church, claiming he'd already nailed down everyone's role in the whole operation. Belle whips around to Denko and promises he'll handle the food. If the dishes run short, they'll conjure more with earth magic. Denko clenches his fists and snaps, "Leave it to me." Belle stares at the fairies and declares they're about to handle communication, and the whole group is stunned, because they didn't expect the kid to bring work for them, too. Belle tells Kayaichi he'll crush the disorder, and if it gets ugly, he'll swing into action. The boy nods, but Takaru whispers, "Try not to use force." Then Belle whips around to Tucker, shoves a roll of paper into his hands, and declares that Tucker will run the reconstruction, leaving the young man utterly stunned. Takiru fires off, asking if this isn't Belle's job, but the boy shakes his head and says he's got bigger things to handle right now. Takaru leans in and asks, "Could it be that?" Belle wants to dump her duties on him because she's tired of the hassle, and then Belle asks, "How did that young man say?" Then he swings the blueprint roll and whacks Takaru on the head, grinning as he claims he's thought of everything. Instead, he's heading to meet a powerful man who'll back the church. Takuru demands why the kid won't do it himself, and Belle snaps back that ever since meeting his sire, his head's been packed with a million things to think about. As he thought, only a seasoned adult with serious experience could handle work like this. Kachi leaned in and asked what Belle had up his sleeve. Then Belle said he was trying to hire Blarney, the merchant adventurer, and Dinko shot back that if his memory didn't fail him, turns out it was that young guy who found him at the port of Aniki, nodding along and then spilling out what he's really feeling. Keiichi tells them, "If my injuries get that bad, I might as well quit my job." And then he's left wondering if they'd actually agree. Belle says he'll never know unless he asks, but the trouble is, he's totally blank on where his house even is. Then a girl's voice pops up from the side saying, "If that's all this is..." Then she finally figures out exactly where his house is. Turns out the girl was Sani, and she slid right into the seat beside Takaru. Then everyone erupted in screams like they'd seen a ghost, while Sani only laughed at how perfectly the guy reacted. Belle leaned in and demanded to know where that girl had come from in the first place. The girl scooted in close to Tucker and insisted this was nothing more than a friendly stop in the middle of their walk. Then Sunny admits, at least they saw her at the port. Kaji demands the girl explain how she even knows. Then he shoves Takaru away from her, just as she bursts into laughter and says, "You can't ever underestimate idle gossip's reach." The girl turns the heat on Kaji. Does that elf really not believe him? He nodded and snapped that gossip wasn't proof. Then Sunny stared at the kid, expressionless, not a hint of a smile. She flashes a sly smirk and fires. "So, what do you think you're doing, thick-headed elf?" Keiichi shrugged and said he was just stating the facts. Nothing more, no drama. A weird tension hung between them. Belle shrugged and said, "At least we've got a lead." Then he pushed for everyone to cash it in, and the girl spun around and agreed, snapping that the boys should have done this from the start. The girl suggests they grab fresh fruit at the market while they search for their friends, and Belle agrees, then begs Sunny, "Don't tease us too hard, we're serious." Sunny just laughs and fires back, "You really think I'm saying you're guilty?" Because her friends are totally enjoying her jokes. After a while, the young man strode through the city streets, lost in thought, trying to figure out where he should begin his search. He stares at those juicy apples in the shop when the young man reaches out, right as a woman's hand snaps in too, and their fingers touch over the same apple. The young man blurts out an apology, then spots a girl right in front of him. Then he snaps, there's Navari in front of him, and he can't believe it. Somehow, he found her that fast. He was thrilled he found her here, because he'd been hunting for her all along, and when he finally showed up, the girl demanded to know what he wanted from her. The young man blurted that he needed the girl to bring him straight to her father. She scowled at the boy and told him her dad still wasn't doing great, and Belle shot back that the girl should let him say hello, because he'd been worrying sick about how he was doing. The girl admitted that ever since that accident that day, her energy just drained away, and Belle nodded like, "I get it. I understand everything." After a bit, the young man slides in beside Navari's father's bed and tells him everything's okay, but he's not fooled. That cut is still screaming with pain, so he hands over medicine to dull the hurt. The man hands the medicine to his daughter and blurts out his thanks to Belle, but Belle just waves him off. She spots all the commotion and presses, "So you're really planning to move?" The man nodded, saying he'd rented the place to work, but now he wouldn't show up anymore. So Belle let out a heavy sigh, because that meant the guy was truly about to quit his job. And the man just turned around and went back. He finally admitted it. Everything was hopeless. He was badly injured, his ship had burned to ashes, and his name was wrecked for good, while Navari sat there peeling an apple for her father, listening as he struggled to figure out how to land a near job. Belle grinned and said it couldn't have landed at a better moment. Navari and the man stared at the boy, confused, and Belle insisted he'd come here for one reason, to offer him a job. The man nodded like he finally got it, then lit up and said, "All right, then I definitely agree." Navari shot up and insisted, "If my father really means it, then even without knowing a single detail, he'd still back this." The man demands what the Navari are even talking about, saying they owe Belle way too much. Then the girl smirks and admits she knows, but warns it's kinda scary. The man demands to know what Belle wants from him, and the boy waves it off, saying he doesn't need anything big at all, just someone to look after the church. The man smirked and said, with Belle's tone, "That's not the whole story." Then the boy nodded, eager as hell, and told him there was one more thing about her he just had to ask. Navari narrowed her eyes and snapped at the young man to stop hiding behind riddles and just say it straight, clearly. Then the young man shot back that she shouldn't stare at him like that, because this deal was good for both of them. The young man shoots up his index finger, calls the man by name, Blarney, and declares he wants to hand him the entire island. A deserted island sits miles from the capital, and that's where his friendship ends up. Then Navari bursts out, yelling that this has nothing to do with the church, and the young man shoots back, insisting it's something totally different. He said the church is being rebuilt by orphans and folks from the slums, but once the job's done, they'll be tossed out too. No jobs left for them. The man nodded like he got it, then asked, "So is this when the desert island finally kicks in?" He gets that the young man's trying to use all these people to build up the island, and when Belle agrees, he tells them they can run wild, do it however they want, and if they pull it off, he's certain it'll open a brand new stream of income. Belle taps his chest and promises he'll handle the money and supplies. And right then, Navari's patience finally snaps. Her head starts to boil as she whips around to confront her father, who's been silent the whole time. The man blurted, "Ubrecht!" Then Belle pressed him again. What did it mean? He shrugged, saying he figured that's what he'd name his island. And in the tongue of the southern continent, it meant harmony. With full permission to do whatever they want, he decides to build a real trading city, starting with the one thing they can't skip, a proper port. He warns it might not happen anytime soon, but then he asks, "So who do you know that'd be down to trade with us?" And right after that, the guy pleads, "Let me introduce you better." The boy bursts into laughter, and the man snaps, asking if he said something inappropriate. The boy grins back that his energy blows him away for his age, just like you'd expect from a former merchant adventurer. He's stuck in his head, hunting for the perfect trading partner. Bell claims he has mermaid friends, fires the question at the man, and the guy looks stunned. So Bell presses him again about mermaids, and when the man finally admits he's hooked, he grabs hold of Bell and begs, "Tell me more." After a while, the protagonist storms up to the church and straight up asks Takaru how they're holding up there. The young man grins and says, "Everything's awesome here. Everyone's busting their butts," and swears they'll wrap it up in just 2 or 3 days. Takaru spots Navari and Blarney closing in on them fast. Takaru demands to know if the man's body is totally okay, and Blarney snaps back that he's in the best shape he can be, then begs his pardon because he's dying to go inspect the church. Takiru leans in and asks Bell, "Did it really go smoothly?" Then he presses again, insisting it was even smoother than before, somehow better than ever, while the old man can't wait and practically rushes to jump into the water for the island right away. Then a girl barges into the room, yells for everyone to stop working because dinner's ready, and right when he turns, Blarney is suddenly right in front of him, and fear hits him like a punch. The man shoots an apology to the girl. Dell snaps his head toward Karaya and tells her this guy's got them from here. Then the man introduces himself as Blarney, beaming like he can't wait to meet the girl. She went quiet for a beat, then broke the silence with a shy, humble smile. "I'm also really happy to meet you. My name is K.R.I." Blarney flashes a grin and tells the girl to stop shaking, because for him, they won't just be co-workers. From now on, they're all going to be one big family. So he gently rubs her head, and she immediately asks again, "What about us?" Then more kids burst into the scene. One younger girl steps up and thrusts a steaming mug of hot liquid into his hand. She asks the guy if he'll join them for dinner, and right away he says yes. "Blimey, Blarney!" Then he grabs the mug. Then he calls Navari to come with them, and the girl nods yes, straight to her father's request. Takora tells Bell it looks like Mawan is about to be okay. Bell agrees. Finally, he turns to Navari, who's already facing him. The girl strides up to Tucker and Bell and blurts, "Did something happen to you?" Navari leans in and tells Bell, "You're a good person," and the young man wastes no time thanking her. Then Navari whips her head toward her father, who's busy chatting with the kids, and she blurts that it's been forever since she's seen him this happy. The girl blushes hard and with a bright smile thanks Bella for everything. The young man smiles right back, then shakes his head and insists he doesn't deserve that kind of gratitude. The kids sprint to Navari and shout that her father wants the girl over for dinner, and Belle watches the girl's face light up like she's genuinely happy too. Takeru swings an invite to Belle for dinner, and the boy can't resist. He agrees on the spot. The very next day, the kids raced through the churchyard, laughing and playing like they owned the whole world. Belle steps out, smiles at everyone, and asks how they're doing. Then the church minister beams back that everyone's thrilled with the fresh play area that popped up after the renovation. Then the girls storm up to Belle and demand where Blarney and older sister Navari are. Belle shoots back that they just left for the island of Abrecht, so they're not here anymore. The girl blurts that it's painfully sad, and the young man snaps his hand to his head, apologizing non-stop to the girls, then promises he'll get them to come another time. Right then, Navari herself burst onto the scene, and the girls spotted her and sprinted over with pure joy, while Belle admitted he'd been sure that girl had already gone with Borny to the island. The girl blurts that she'd planned it all, then says she actually needs to ask him something, and Belle can't believe it, demanding, "Wait, is that really what's going on?" That girl begs Belle to build her a magic ship, and Belle's jaw drops as she blurts, "Wait, what are you talking about?" Belle leans in and demands to know why she'd chase a magical ship, especially after her father abandoned his business. So she snaps back that she wants to keep it going, just like he started. After his ship burned to ash, she knew she had to find a way to start over. So she hunted down the only kind of person who could build her a brand new ship. Danko leaned in and told her Belle would be exactly who they needed, and the boy shot back, "Are you sure?" The girl nodded and blurted out what he'd said. "Belle can do this, even build a giant ship with magic." And the young guy basically hyped her up like, she can do anything because she's unreal. That young man grinned, clocked it was straight out of Denko's playbook, and nodded, then promised, "I'm doing it." Navari lit up with joy and promised she'd help the young man any way she could, so he could lean on her without fear, and the young man nodded in agreement. Navari asks if they're heading out for materials right now, but Bell shakes his head, because as long as he's got some sand, or better yet, iron sand, he'll knock together a perfect ship model in no time. A young man painstakingly builds a model ship and hands it to a girl, and when she sees it, her eyes light up in pure awe. Navari leans in and challenges the boy, asking if he can really do anything at all. Then Bell grins and says, "Building a model is easy, but to get the ship moving, they'll need a real power source." Navari figures out the magic ships aren't just sailing, they're powered by magic, and she decides to hunt down where it all comes from, the magic stone. The young man nods right along with her. Then she realizes she's practically standing shoulder to shoulder with the boy. She whips her face away and blushes hard, and Belle blurts out, "So, is there a shop that sells magic stones?" Navari claims they've got it, sure, but you'll have to cough up 3 gold coins. It's just a little stone, the size you'd tuck in a ring, like that. Belle fires back that a ring is still a luxury. Dell tells her not to stress about the money, then points out they'll need a bigger stone to power the ship, and the girl snaps back that he's totally right. Navari snaps back that, in the capital, magical stones are mostly just shiny decorations, so she can't imagine they'll find one massive enough to swallow an entire ship. Belle figures they've got no choice but to hit every store in the capital, and when Navari pushes them to just go, the young man nods and jumps in. After a while, the young man and woman hit shop after shop, weaving through the crowds like they're on a mission. Belle can't shake the feeling that the big magic stone is slipping out of reach here, and it looks like he's got no real choice left. He's convinced it's finally time to go hunt the monsters, snatch their magic stones, and the young man grinds his fists together. He finally gets it. Everything's already set in stone, so he stops wasting time and dives straight into business. Then, from outside the door, a voice snaps that there's no reason for this at all. Sunny bursts in and blurts that the young man is swamped today, like things are hitting him hard, so hard. Belle just smirks and says that girl is everywhere. If she's here, then that can only mean one thing. She came to deliver him the info he needs. The girl flashes a smug grin and tells the boy, "This time, I'm giving you advice." Belle tilts her head and asks, "What kind of advice?" Sunny flashes a grin and warns the young man to stay right where he is, no shifting an inch, while the protagonist just stares in shock, completely lost on what she's even talking about. The young man demands what Sunny meant, and she snaps back that there's no use spiraling into thoughts until everyone shows up. Nobody gets to leave. Then Sunny promises he'll get the answer he's chasing, and Belle tells them to wait. Belle's left standing there, totally alone, and he just can't figure out what kind of advice this is supposed to be. Suddenly, someone shouts for Belle from the side. A young man closes in and tells him he's been hunting for him all over the city. The kid racks his brain for the guy's name, then blurts out, "It's definitely Laguerre." Laguerre grins and says he's just glad Belle finally remembered him. Belle leans in and asks the young man what's going on. Laguerre admits he only heard rumors that Belle is hunting a huge magic stone to power the ship. He tells them, "Just give it to us," and says the company Bozzywarder will take care of this because they've got a stash of top-tier magic stones ready on the shelves, and the young man can't help but ask, "Is that really true?" Navari calls Belle over, spots a guy nearby, and demands his name. Belle goes, "That's Laguerre," and says he's here to sell them a magic stone. Navari's impressed, but Laguerre waves it off and won't take the gratitude. The man says, "All right, then let me take them to the store." After a bit, Navari leans in and asks if this means Belle is secretly a real friend to Basavato. Laguerre says they all click perfectly, and right then, Belle comes walking up behind them. Laguerre shoots, "Am I right?" And Belle nods hard, saying Basavato is seriously one of the most interesting people around. Honestly, he never expected Bachivador to be this famous, and Navari shot him a look asking if the young man was really serious. Navari swears Basiwador is the biggest traitor in this whole country. Like, nobody here doesn't know his name, and Belle just nods, saying, yeah, he really is that important. Navari blurts out that Belle is downright weird, and just like that, Legier spots something out of the corner of his eye. Right at that instant, stuff from the side rips up into the air like it's been launched. A brutal object slams into Legier, and Navari freezes with a jolt. Then she blurts the man's name. But before she can breathe, a barrel drops right beside her, sending her screaming in fear as she snatches Belle. Belle snaps the clicks of his power, and a blazing dome slams into place around him and Navari. The young man swears it's a tornado. Then his stomach drops when it shows up out of nowhere. Then he spots a girl perched on the house's roof. Navari immediately demands, "Is that the princess?" And Belle can't believe his eyes. He's convinced this girl is a princess. The same girl everyone said was picked by God when she was 10. Then she comes barreling out, lungs burning, and screams, "We can't keep hiding anymore." That hero princess didn't just show up. She obliterated every last villain who came their way, bringing nothing but pure chaos. Everyone stood there stunned. Then they burst into gratitude, thanking the princess for rescuing them all. Then Navari snapped back to Legier and asked how he was doing, only for Belle to point out that, yeah, he'd been hit so hard he'd vanished in a blink. And right then the girl scooped up Legier's body, told Belle and Navari not to panic, and explained that he'd only passed out. Belle and Navari blink in shock when the girl introduces herself, Marie, Her Highness's personal bodyguard, and then she rushes in with a blazing apology for the late reveal, begs for forgiveness, and quickly steers Legier away. Belle says the royal capital is seriously something to see, and Navari nods along. Then he hits the real question. So how are we getting the magic stone now? Belle grimly looks at Legier and says, "With him like this, we're not getting it today. No way." Then a voice snaps from the side. Navari's heart drops when she hears her father. The girl blurts, "Why are you here?" And he answers, smiling through the distance, "Because I came to hand something to my daughter." He blurts out, "Wait, are you really asking Belle to build you a ship?" And that's when it clicks for him why she'd need a magic stone to pull it off. Belle grins and swears this magic sword will do the job. Pump out enough mana to power the ship. Navari asks, "Didn't you stay in your mother's memory?" The man insists everything's fine, and with that, he hands over the sword to the girl. He's certain his mother would light up the moment she sees him, smiling like never before. The girl grips the sword tight, thanks her father, then thrusts it into Belle's hands and begs him to unleash his magic. Belle leans in and grills the girl. "Are you really sure? After all, this thing is priceless." The girl just shrugs and says, "I already told you, everything's fine." She lays down her deal. Try your hardest to build the best ship you possibly can. And the young man flashes a grin. He hurls the sword at full force. Then he drapes that precious sword in his magic like it's about to ignite the whole world. Then he builds a massive ship, and when he shows it off, he says it came out just like this. The man couldn't stop smiling. Belle shrugged it off like it was no big deal. But he'd built a ship that could actually harness the magic sword's power. And then he turns to Navari, asking what she thinks and whether she likes his masterpiece. The girl nods instantly, beams, and says she's totally obsessed with it because, yeah, this ship is hands down the best. The girl starts patting Belle on the shoulder and blurts, "What's the ship like inside?" So she tells him, "Come on, take a look." Then the girl snaps to attention, backs away from the boy, and Belle grins. "Now it's my ship, so I can do whatever I want with it, and I'll decorate the inside however I please." The girl nods and agrees. He clocks her shyness, lifts a finger to tell her not to worry because her dad will always have her back. Then she folds into even bigger shyness, and Belle can't figure out what on earth they're talking about. The next morning, while Danko and Takaru were still crashed out, Belle had already slipped outside. Then a voice from the side popped up and greeted her good morning. Belle catches Kayaja kicking back with the fairies on the roof, then blurts that he woke up early. Kayaja asks where he's headed, and Belle reveals he plans to visit Basiwador. Kayaja backs the plan without hesitation. The fairies, Belle included, grabbed his attention and begged him to look after himself. Then Belle snaps into motion and sprints off toward his destination. Qianxia whips around to the fairies and declares it's breakfast time, and the little helpers swarm in to back the young man while he cooks. After a while, Thel was already striding through the city streets, and then it hit him. Yeah, now that he really thought about it, he has no clue where Bozzy Widor even lives. Maybe he's still out on the seas, and now he's kicking himself for not asking Leger. If only he had some serious GPS skills, he thought, because then he could swing back and grab one of those fairies to take with him. Suddenly, someone from the side yells at him, and the sound snaps his attention instantly. The princess flat out told Belle that his look screamed, "Something's wrong," and Belle stared at her like, "Great, another weirdo from his weird lineup." She flashes a grin and declares, "I'm the heroine princess, the very one who saves all the weak, powerless people out there." The girl strides up to the boy and asks if he needs a hand, and Belle flashes a grin, saying her help won't hurt him at all. He asks the princess if she knows a man named Barvod and Barvader. He's desperate to meet him, but she has no idea where the guy even lives, and the girl can only think. Then she digs through her memories, begging for a little time, and when the name finally clicks, her eyes light up. She's sure she's heard it before, and she blurts out, "I remember!" She knows this guy's shop like the back of her hand, so she tells Belle, "Come on, I'll show you around." And the young man just stares, shocked, like, "Wait, you're serious?" Belle softly pats the princess's head and whispers that he's counting on the girl. She flops around on her lap and squeaks that someone's been patting her head. Belle just stares and thinks, "Sure, you're a hero, but you're only 10, and you're the same age as Tuda." Then the young man spots someone staring from across the way, and the girl reveals a note that reads, "Marie, Her Highness's bodyguard." Even though Her Highness is still a kid, she's royal through and through, so next time, don't go grabbing her body so casually, or you're looking at a beheading. Belle can't believe what she just heard. Then Marie grabs a pen and starts scribbling on paper, and Belle's eyes widen because she's got something else to say to him, like, "This time, you can get away with that audacity." Marie flashes a paper that reads, "Her Highness looks totally cute," and Belle tries to brush it off because Marie may love cute girls, but she's still a pureblood. Then the princess snaps around and demands to know what's wrong, like something is lurking right behind Belle. She whips toward the pipe, but Marie is already gone. The girl shrugs it off, waves the boy along, and says she'll lead him to the store, and Belle nods and agrees. After a while, the princess finally stops and blurts out that they've already arrived. Spotting a massive crowd, Belle lights up at how alive everything feels, and the princess nods right along. Then Belle grins, calls her a true heroine, and slips her a bag of sweets as a thank you prize. The girl's eyes light up at all the sweets, and she immediately asks to share them. So Belle approves, and Princess Marie, after thanking the young man, shoots into the sky with the leaflet clutched in her hands. Belle gets shoved to the side and left alone, panicking that with this crowd, he'll be stuck waiting for hours. So he decides to slip in through the back door. The young man raps hard on the back door, like he's running out of time. A girl swings the door open for him, then blurts out an apology.
She never imagined anyone would be here.
So the young man just shakes his head and tells her it's fine, saying it's his fault. The girl fumbles out that if he's got business with the company, he should use the front door. Then Leger clocks them instantly. The man welcomed him into the Bassi Woodor company, and the young one nodded at Leger, smiling like he couldn't believe everything was in perfect order. The girl asks if Belle is truly the rumored star. Leger nods and confirms it, so the girl thanks Belle for fixing her father's ship, and Belle just quips back, "Who exactly do you mean?" The girl barges in, grabs the moment, and blurts out, "Forgive me!" Then she introduces herself as Zanino, Barvodin Baziwarder's daughter. The girl whips her head toward Leger and says she'll drag Belle into the house herself. Then the man nods and agrees. After a little while, they sip their tea, and the girl drops the bomb that his father hasn't come home since early morning, even though she swears he'll be back any minute. The young man takes one look around and sees gilded rooms, a stunning daughter, and servants dressed so sharp they look like they belong in a royal story. That's not the uncle he knows at all. Then he catches the girl calling out, wishing her father a warm welcome home. A man strutted in wearing flashy, shiny clothes, snapped at Bell that he should have said he'd arrive earlier, and then, boom. Bell's heart nearly stopped at what he was staring at. The man pressed him, asking what was wrong with the way he was staring. Maybe something was off. While Bell froze for a beat and finally blurted that the man looked just like a nobleman. Bazirador pushed harder, and Bell shot back without backing down. He was the real nobleman. The man tells him his father wasn't just a merchant, he was a nobleman too, even earning a peerage for pouring massive money into the country, though the honor is basically ceremonial. Then one of the houseworkers marched up and asked the man's master if they should start cooking dinner, and he snapped back, "Why was it already this late?" The man pauses, then leans in and quizzes Bell about the exact dish he'd just eaten at his place, asking if he can cook it again. Bell nods and tells him it's doable, but it'll take a little time. The man admits that asking his guest to cook the dish sounds totally weird, but he's been craving that taste for ages. Then Bell gets it and tells him the girl doesn't have a choice but to say yes. Then he asks where their kitchen is, and the girl nods, telling the boy to follow her, smiling the whole time as she asks him to let her lend a hand. The man's totally stunned, but his daughter just smirks. The more people, the better. And Basewidow snaps at her to stop acting stupid. Belle frets over Zanino's safety, but she brushes it off and insists she's ready to handle the housework. Zanino then starts wondering if her father's just being too overprotective, and Belle shoots back that he isn't. He just loves her like crazy. After a while, they finally reach the kitchen. Then the girl turns to the boy and asks what she's supposed to do. Belle pitches the girl some guza, Baziwador's favorite dish. But Zanino snaps again, pressing for the name, because he's hearing about it for the very first time. The girl beams with joy and tells Belle she's about to whip up this dish. Then the boy blasts them with magic. Onions, potatoes, carrots, radishes, and more pop into existence. And right after that, they start talking, all while Zanino listens in shock. After a while, the table overflowed with mouth-watering dishes, and Sevador grinned like a kid in a candy store. Belle told everyone they'd set the whole thing up for the crowd, so even the servants could dive into the dinner too. Then the male servant bowed and thanked the young man for his kind attention. Bazivadora snatches Zanino's attention, saying she whipped up the guza just for him, then urges him to take a bite, and Zanino stares at the plate, asking if she really made it herself. The man raises a hand to bless the dish his daughter made just for him, and the girl practically orders him to dig in right now, before it all goes cold. Belle told Baziwador, "Your daughter's right, just take your time," and reminded him he'd already taught her the recipe so she could cook it again. The man nodded along and agreed. Then, Baziwador corners Belle and demands to know why the kid was even hunting him down. Belle pauses, then guesses he just wanted to see the man's face. Baziwador bursts out laughing, like the boy had zero reason to even come. A few days later, Belle cornered Takaru and asked, "So, what do you think about starting up a stall?" Takuru stared the boy down, flat out saying he wouldn't help him with this. So Belle shot back, "You mean it?" Because Takuru didn't even pause before answering. Takeru begged, "Let me ask, what's Belle planning to sell?" And Belle snapped back, "I've got a few ideas, but I can't decide which one." He snaps his fingers and demands Takeru pick the best one. Then a storm of objects explodes into the air, and Takeru freezes in fear. Kaj steps in and tells Belle to quit messing with his captain, but the protagonist just laughs, throws out an apology, and keeps it moving. Belle leans in and asks Kayak what he thinks would sell the best, and the elf studies the goods so closely that his mind locks onto something irresistible. The kid gets it. If he doesn't stock the counter with real, eye-catching stuff, customers will walk right past. Kayak even warns that creepy weirdness will chase them away fast, and that's exactly how he lands on that wild, unusual toy. Then Carrie spots something off, and Belle immediately snaps. "What happened to that girl?" She flashes the pin and demands, "What's this for?" The boy grins and says it's called a kanzashi, used to decorate hair. Then he braids her hair and snaps the pin right into place. Carrie blurts out that she's never seen ornaments like these in her life, then realizes there's nothing even close to them anywhere in the capital. Belle fully takes that in. Takeru shakes his head and says he can't believe things like kanzashi and kimono even exist in this world. while Belle fires back that back in his village, those same things used to be totally abnormal. The other girls kept whispering that Karaya was insanely lucky, and it only made them seethe with jealousy, while Thel, right then, was fretting over whether he had any more hairpins left and if he should try to sell them. After a while, he opened a shop packed with strange, one-of-a-kind goods, but he quickly realized it wouldn't be that simple, because nobody came knocking. He figures the customers are about to open stores of their own, so all he can do is sit tight and wait. Suddenly, the young man snapped his head toward the side as loud wrestling erupted nearby. He spots a tiny fairy right there, peering at Belle's amazing treasures, and the young man blurts out that she's one of the fairies. Prish snaps at Belle for being rude, tells him her name is Prish and to remember it. Belle shoots back an apology. Then she demands why he's so concerned, and Prish says she came because she found the store fascinating, full of beautiful things. Belle finally clicks. These fairies aren't all the same. Each one's got their own spark, and she offers the fairy who liked the clothes a few extra items. Even when the fairy hesitates, worried she's too small for them, Belle steps in and reassures her. He brags that his sister hand-stitched doll dresses, swears they'll fit her perfectly, and when Prish hears that, joy bursts across his face as he thanks Belle for helping him. She blurted that she'd try every single one on right now, and the young guy urged her not to rush. Then the main character got called out from the side, and someone joked that it was hilarious to run into him here. Dariella and Belira lit up as they greeted the young man, then told him they hadn't seen him in ages. Belle leaned in and asked if they weren't heading out with Zamboree today, and the girl grinned. Yeah, they were off, totally done for the day. Then he snapped that Kayache must have caused trouble for this kid after all, while Belle shot back, "No way. I think we're getting along just fine." And still, there's something crazy nice about wandering the market until you get clocked on every corner and suddenly it feels like they're struggling to keep up. Belira shrugged and said it made perfect sense since Dariella was practically a tower. Then Dariella snapped that Belira better not forget his wings because once they were out, everyone would know exactly who they belonged to. Suddenly, he snapped his fingers and told the girls to listen, then begged for a favor. Dariella just laughed. Belira shot back that she wouldn't lift a finger, and Belle insisted that wasn't what he had in mind. Belle insists he just wants girls to slip into his clothes and strut through the market in them. Belira basically told them, "So that's it. Belle wants you to be advertising models to pull in clients." And Belle just nodded along and agreed. Dariella burst out laughing and said Belle was seriously an insanely interesting guy. Then Belira snapped at her to cut it out. She rushes up to Belle, blurts out that she won't take charity, and then fires off, "So what do we actually get for it?" Belle was about to let them pick from one of her items, until Belira shrieked that the kid was mocking her, then demanded he hand over at least 2/3 of the sales or give them something that actually felt worth it. Belle fired back that it was a total rip-off, and Dariella rushed in to calm the chaos. Suddenly, Princess Hyrule burst in and shouted for everyone to stop throwing punches because fighting is poison. And then she paused for a single beat. The princess tells Belle she's the very gentleman who handed her that candy, and Belle steps forward to greet her. Then he leans in and asks if she's really back out patrolling the streets again, before he finally thanks her for worrying about him. Then the girl pointed at Dariella and Belira and announced that those ladies are here too. Right after that, she asked if they were really from the Red Thunder. Dariella straightened up and said they were honored the princess remembered their names. Then the princess leans in and demands to know why they battled in the first place. The girl heard the whole argument laid out, and her face lit up with pure joy. Then the princess gushed that the advertising model sounded incredible, and she instantly demanded one of her own. The princess calls Belira and asks her to team up as advertising models, and Dariella immediately snaps back that if it's a direct order from Her Highness, there's no way they can refuse. Belira only nods and says she understands. She couldn't wait to grab some sweets after they were done. That was their reward, and Belle nodded right along. A fairy pops in, wearing a stunning new dress, and asks, "Is everything okay?" The princess gushes about how adorable she looks, and Belira can't help teasing her weird little fairy friend. Then Belle steps in and suggests the fairy become the face of an advertisement with the girls. Prish stared in shock and blurted out, "I didn't even know that." The princess stepped right up to her, assured her it would all be okay, and promised she'd stay by her side no matter what. She argues that the girl's already dressed to impress, and not showing it off would be a crime. Prish nods and agrees. After a while, the girls stepped out for a walk, and everywhere they turned, people couldn't stop staring at the princess and her jaw-dropping beautiful dress. Then, eyes snapped to Balira in the Red Thunder, standing right by Her Highness, and of course, Dariella too. The little kids beamed as they greeted the fairy perched on Dariella's head, and Prish flashed a sweet smile, then lifted her hand and waved. After a bit, Belle lit up and told the girls they absolutely nailed it, that this was a real win, and he rewarded them with sweets, praising those cookies as seriously tasty. He shrugs off the drama and says the girls are a little too much, and Balira grins. Doesn't it feel amazing when your shop is booming? Then Balira promised they'd meet again. Dariella thanked Belle for the sweets, and the princess hero rushed over to Belle with the same vow. "We'll see each other again." Belle told everyone to hold up for a sec, then stared out at the massive sea of people and wondered, "Can I really serve all of them alone?" Then Prish whips around and calls him over, promising she'll help with his work, offering to tackle it all together. Belle shoots a grateful look at the girl, and the fairy nods like, "Let's do this." After trading for a bit, the young man slid the customer change, 3 bronze coins clinking into his hand. The boy thanks the girl for her purchase, and then Prish lets out a heavy sigh. Finally, they're done. Belle grins and says it was a job well done, since the girl helped her out. Outside, a sign in the window spells it out. Every single item is sold out. Prissy finally admits she was terrified the fight would drag on forever. Then Belle rushes in with an apology, blaming the money she wanted and the way it made him lose his head. But right then, Prissy's stomach growls, and she realizes she suddenly needs a snack, and Belle just grins back. Good timing. It's almost noon. After they finish cleaning up, the young man waves Prish over and tells her, "Come on, let's grab something to eat." Then asks if she wants to go somewhere with him. Prish bursts off and announces she wants to try the market food, and Bella immediately nods along. After a while, he and Prish were weaving through the bustling market, and the young man snagged a small portion of fried meat for himself and the fairy. Then later, they grabbed a helping of fresh vegetable salad too. Then she spots those gorgeous berries and begs Belle to let her try them. But the young guy snaps back, saying she eats way too much. So where does she even put all that food? The girl insists she's always got room for dessert, and Belle nods along. Then he whirls around and spots something that makes his world snap. He keeps trudging forward when he suddenly senses a cloaked man tailing him. So he whips around the corner, only to have Prish ask if something's wrong, and the boy just scratches his head like, "I thought it was only my imagination." But it looks like someone's tailing them. Prish is completely blindsided by it. The girl worries the mafia might be coming back for them, but Belle shakes her head. This time, it doesn't look like it at all. The mafia mess is already handled, all thanks to a retired man. Suddenly, Prish spots a cloaked man sprinting into the very alley he and Belle just turned into, right at them. Prish blurts that the guy is charging his way at full speed. Belle doesn't even flinch. She freezes, tracks him in, and then swings. He slams a wall up in front of his pursuer, whirls around, and declares that now he'll disappear. Prish nods along. Suddenly, this man bolts up the alley and starts sprinting along the walls of the houses like it's nothing. The hood slips off the pursuer's head, and Belle stares. It's a dark-haired girl. Prish's jaw drops, shocked it isn't a man at all. Then the girl smirks and tells Belle, "You're really quite good-looking." Out of nowhere, a voice barked from behind, "Stop it, Celine!" And a man lunged into view, convinced Celine was doing whatever she pleased. Celine shot back, calling him master. Belle shot his hand up in front of his face and demanded to know if this guy was really the girl's boss. Then the man erupted into yelling, telling Belle to wait a second because he didn't want to fight. Belle demands why they're trailing him, and the man admits he got curious the moment he heard about the man with the fairy, so he tracked them down. The man blurts out, "I'm Chanteron, merchant from the eastern continent," then jabs a finger at the girl and declares she's his assistant, Salim. The girl blurts out an apology and admits she only attacked to test how strong the boy really was, and Belle can't stop wondering why she would risk everything just for that. Shanta! He grins and calls Selena a full-on rascal, then jabs his finger right at her face, only for her to snap back that the master is getting on her nerves. Right in the middle of it, Prish suddenly declares, "They look like good people." Sailing yanks the master's hand away and demands he finally quit wasting time and spill the real story. Then the man nods and agrees. Then the man's words choke up. He starts stuttering. He shoots Belle a look, extends his hand, and blurts out that he wants to be friends. He asks, "So how about that?" And the man goes, "Sounds great." Selena snaps at him to start talking business, and Thel can't ignore it. His eerie calm is setting off alarm bells. The man says, "I've got something else to show," and unveils his ship. Then he leans in, dying to ask the boy's name. Belle steps forward and says, "I'm Belle. Prish is her name." And when Prish meets Shantar and Celine, she lights up, gushing that she's thrilled to finally meet them. Celine smiles back and adds, "And Prish is really sweet." After a while, Belle, Shanta, Celine, and Prish finally reach Shanta and Celine's ship. Belle blurts out that it looks weird and that every ship from the east is built just like this. Shanta grins and says he thinks they're all bursting with color, and he even decked out his ship to look like an amulet. Then Belle chimes in that folks from the east are fiercely religious. At that age, for Shantar to own a ship, he'd have to be swimming in cash. Celine cuts in out of nowhere and tells Mr. Bell, "This isn't just any ship, this is my master's older brother's." And that's when he got it without permission. Chaunter instantly threw his hands up and covered his face. He tells himself he can't go to his brother, the guy who never lends a thing, and Bell clocks that Shante is dead serious. Chanter doesn't just walk in on a whim. He tells the boy he planned this, then drops a massive pile of boxes right in front of him. Krish tells her, "Yeah, there are a bunch of boxes here," then leans in and asks what's inside. Shanta says, "These are goods you can only find over in the east." Prish grins and adds, "If I can sell them, my brother will finally have to see me and admit it." Bell insists everything is top tier, then twists a tea leaf between his fingers like it holds the truth, while Celine shoots back that, at least to the master, he's totally wrong. At this pace, he's not going to see a single profit. Fell can't help but wonder if his personality is the real reason this could even work. Krish whips around toward Shantar and blurts, "What the heck is happening here?" The man insists it's non-perishable food called Bamanov, fried to perfection and insanely tasty, and Prish challenges him, asking if that's really true, because he's heard the East is packed with all kinds of bizarre surprises. The young man grabs one of the bags, swears he's seen it somewhere before, and then it hits him. It's cup mochi, and somehow he really is going to find it in this world. Bell demands to know how much Bayman Chaunter's holding in total, and Chaunter fires back that he's got plenty, enough to sell and even stash away for emergency food. He reckons it's about 6 boxes. Bell says, "If that's the case, can Shantar sell me every last box?" He stops him, blurts, "Hold up, just 1 second," and admits he wants more of those tea leaves, plus he's hunting for those spices too. He nods and blurts that he wants to buy every last item. Shantar is left absolutely stunned. The young man snaps out 5 gold bars and shoots back, "So, is this enough?" Shantar gapes when he spots the gold bars, and Bell blurts, "Wait, could it be there isn't enough?" Bell declares that only his judgment matters. Shanta lunges for the ingots, but Celine stops her cold and tells the master, "Hold up, wait." The girl whips around to Master Bell and tells him, "Good news, your conditions are perfect, but we can't sell off all the goods." Chanter blurts out, "Why can't we sell everything?" Sailing says a business lives and dies by high profits, but she also demands respect for personal relationships. Then she leans in and tells the master to think it through. If he ships every last item straight to Bell and nowhere else, then the goods won't spread through the capital. He refuses to build real connections with other traders, so he's stuck with 0 experience. Doesn't that mean business in the capital is going to get tougher and tougher? She asks if this is normal. Chanter scoffs. "No way, probably not. while Celine snaps back that if that's true, he's got to watch himself. The girl rushes to Belle with a heartfelt apology, admitting she hasn't exactly shown her best side. But Belle waves it off, saying it's all good, and even adds that a merchant worrying about his ties to the people around him is completely normal. He makes them promise they'll stick around, because he's going to spill the truth about Chanterre. He's got friends stacked up in the capital. The man leans in and demands, "So tell me, are you really serious?" He shoots Belle a grateful look and blurts out that he has no idea how to repay him, because now he finally can head back to his brother. Belle throws his best wishes at Chanterre, hoping this plan works out, and prays Selena won't get stuck dealing with a mountain of trouble. Chanterre promises he'll try, but Celine lets out a heavy sigh and declares him completely hopeless. By the time the night had gone deep, Belle marched everyone into the church and spilled what happened. Takara swore it was all because of it that they were now getting mochi or baiman for dinner, and Belle nodded right along. He swears that with soy sauce and sugar in it, it'll taste unbelievably good, and the moment he takes a bite, he's right back in his happiest New Year memories, scarfing it down every single year. Then Bella grabs Prish, points out the other fairies who are craving those same clothes, and the whole group erupts with joy, only to bombard the young man with questions about how he did it. Coke told the captain the meal was ready. Takaru thanked him, and just like that, Belle snapped to the elf, telling him to be careful before he took a bite, and Coke immediately demanded, "Why?" The young man shot back, "It can get lodged in the throat of people who live that long," and Kaya was sitting right there, about 100 years old. The elf warned, "Bayman is terrifying food," but Belle stepped in fast, insisting that if the elf chewed it, everything would turn out just fine. One morning in the churchyard, one of the girls was crying her heart out, while the others snapped at the boys, because they'd been thinking about it for ages, and honestly, boys are just rude, the absolute worst. Other girls barreled in to shut the argument down and shout for everyone to cool off, Karahi included. Then the girls grilled her, asking if she was really about to team up with the boys, and Karahi snapped back that she didn't mean it like that. Belle and Prish just stood there, baffled, not a clue what was going on. Then Navari burst onto the scene. The girl cheered that Belle had finally showed up, and the young man snapped, "So what happened to the children?" Navari's words tangled. His voice started to stutter and choke. The girl said she was braiding her hair, but right then a boy barged in, grumbling that he didn't get girls, claiming they just have tons of fun messing with their hair. So the girl snapped back that even boys have to take care of theirs, too. She reached for his hair, but he shoved her away, yelled at her to stay hands off, and even started hurling insults at the girl. Navari said that later on, everything spiraled into full-on tears and screams. Belle says it's always been like this, and even the sisters struggle with it. Then Navari drops the bomb. The boy who struck her hasn't said a word since. Belle promised he'd go talk to him, because boys always find it easier to open up with other boys than with girls, and Navari nods right along. He begs Prish to team up with Navari because her healing magic could save the day, and the fairy nods, agreeing without hesitation. Then Belle steps up to the boy and tells him, "I never meant to make her cry," and the boy snaps back, "So why'd you hit her?" The boy told her that she was always right there whenever he tried to touch her hair. Then suddenly, they barely played anymore, and he didn't know why, because he just got bored and snapped in anger. Belle finally clocked it. The answer hit him like a punch. He'd done it with a clear conscience, but handing things out only to girls backfired hard, and somehow that made him the spark for the whole fight. That young man couldn't shake the guilt. Then he vowed he'd figure out how to bring every kid back together, playing side by side again. The boy drops his pride, admits he's wrong, and promises he'll apologize to the girl. Then he shakes his head like there's no way out. Belle leans in and whispers, "Learn from this, and be gentle with the one you like." The boy blushed and snapped that it wasn't like that at all. Then Prish leaned in and told Belle to take it seriously, and Belle shot back that everything was fine, dead serious. He drops the bomb that he and Prish are finished, then asks the girl where the toy store is. After a while, the young man scanned a mountain of toys, eyes lighting up with every single one. Prish challenged him. If the kid could really make a gift for the children, Why dig them to a toy store at all? The boy could have just snapped the toys into existence like he always does, or even used that special sand. And Belle fired back that, sure, he could do that. But his idea of toys is a total blur. No blueprint in his head. No magic can turn it into something real. Prish is shocked. This guy can read the blueprints of massive ships, yet he can't even craft a simple, soft toy. Vel cuts in, begging everyone not to judge, because in his past life, he barely dealt with kids and only learned ship facts from TV. Even if he remembers his childhood, how far back does he have to go? Then, out of nowhere, a bat flashed on the display case. He figured it was just a baseball bat, so why was it sitting here? Then, bam, the store door swung open and a girl stepped in, asking the young man if he was truly interested in her stuff after apologizing for the surprise. Belle pressed the girl. Did she really do it? She nodded and told him that if he was curious, he could swing by her store because she had plenty more. And Belle couldn't stop thinking, this bat shouldn't exist in the world. And just what was it hiding? That girl had been reborn too, so he had to know, no matter what. Prish told Belle to hang back because right now wasn't for aimless strolling. He had to hunt down gifts for the kids. Belle admits he's too curious to stay put, so he's heading to check out the shop. Then Prish stops him cold and tells him to wait. She spat curses at the young man's free-spirited attitude. Belle stepped into the shop and a girl greeted her, and before Belle could do anything, the girl confessed she hadn't introduced herself yet. Then she smiled and said her name was Celine, the shop's owner and a master carpenter. She told him the tiny fairy had already named him Belle, and the young man lit up, nodding like, "Yeah, I'm so happy to finally meet you." The girl lit up and said she was over the moon because she hadn't had any clients in ages. Belle asked how that could be because she had so many great things. Then the girl admitted, "My designs are solid, but people swear they're too weak to swing like this bat." She told him the usual ones hit way harder, but they didn't look as gorgeous. So she chased a model that was beautiful, smooth, and flawless. So yeah, she pulled off that stunning transformation, and she's stunned too, whispering that her own talent scares her, and Belle realizes right then, the girl isn't reborn. She says it's sad, and it hits harder than you'd think. And honestly, the people in the capital just don't get this art. So if things carry on like this, that shop is going to shut its doors for good. Belle leans in, calls her by name, and tells her he's got a proposal just for her. He grabs her attention and invites her to pack up and move straight to her village. If that store keeps being useless, he wants to shake things up a bit, just change it. The girl thanks the boy for worrying about her, but then she digs in, asking what's behind all this. Belle tells him it breaks her heart that nobody sees her talent, and he fires back that she's an incredible artist. Then Salim steps in, grabs the boy by the hands and tells him straight up that in other words, Belle has turned herself into her biggest fan. The young man says, "Not exactly," then shrugs and explains it's pretty much like that, and the girl nods along. If that's what the admirer wants, then I have to do it. Then she fires off a question. "Are you really taking me home like this?" And adds, "If you want, we can head out right now." Belle claims it's not worth rushing. He's got time, for now, because before he takes her to the village, he has a few things to set up, and she'd better get ready too. Dull grabs the bat like he's already decided, asking the girl how much it costs. She lets him take it, but warns him it's not exactly the best weapon, and Dull just nods, saying he's going to use it to mend friendships instead. After a beat, the boy hurled the ball, and the girl with the bat lunged to catch it, then smack! She nailed the hit, and the whole crowd erupted like it was the coolest thing ever. Then the girl snapped her head toward Belle and blurted, "What do I do now?" Belle shot back, "Drop the bat, then sprint to the first point." The girl's lips trembled as she shook her head, totally lost and wondering where she was even supposed to run. Then the boy she just clashed with yanked her hand and shouted that she needed to run, right that way, and Navari couldn't help but grin because the chaos had finally cooled off and everyone was back to playing together, while Belle chimed in that he was happy they were all enjoying the game. Navari blinked in shock when the young man compared it to baseball, and she had to admit the rules felt a total maze. So he grinned, told her it would click once she learned the basics, and reached out his hand to teach her. Belle snapped, "What's wrong?" And Navari just shook his head. "I'm only too close." Suddenly, Celine burst in and grilled the boy about what he was swinging that bat for. And since it looked so wild, Belle couldn't help asking Celine why she showed up at all. The girl said she couldn't stop wondering why he needed the bat, so she showed up, only for him to keep blowing her mind. Her curiosity about the young man skyrocketed, and she couldn't wait to see them thank that girl. Navari pulled Belle over and promised to teach him baseball, and when he apologized for making her wait, he said he was already on his way, only for Celine to jump in and demand the lesson too.